take all as your reality is adjusted.
Welcome back, folks, once again. Oh, let me know, I'll try and get my headset on. Can't fit it on as easily over the top of my new hat. Hang on, stop screen share. Get back to the right screen so I can see what I'm doing, not that one. Oh, terrible. So unprofessional. Alright, is that off? Yeah, okay. Welcome back again, folks. It's another noonday evening. I'm sure you're probably well aware of the particular date in time, which I'll probably mention at least a little bit. Make the camera, it's stabilized a bit. So I was just trying to catch up with the chat. Let me do the pop out chat thing so that I can at least have it visible on my screen while I'm rambling. And I will try and interact with the chat as I do. I'm not very good at the multitasking of following all the conversations at the same time as trying to say my own stuff. So apologies if I miss things, but hello to everyone in the chat room already. It is the 31st of the 12th, 2018. Star date 31122018. Moon day evening happens to be New Year's Eve. Camera's still in orange. Oh, sod it. Yeah, last Monday was Christmas Eve. So, yeah, I wasn't here last Monday, but I thought I will do tonight just because it is the end of the year. It's not really, but, it's the end of time. If you haven't noticed, there are no more dates on your calendar. You got to the end of the calendar and it says 31, and then there's nothing else after that. It's the end of time. Until you go and buy another calendar, of course. But really, I feel anyway, my attitude to it over the years has become the solstice is the end of the year. So when the solstice goes past, whether it's the 20th or the 21st or the 22nd, it's approximately about then of December. When the solstice goes past, that's when the clock starts to shift, as in the movement of the solar system starts to shift, such that the days begin getting slowly longer. So in other words, it's the beginning of the rise into the next year. So the old year is over. You're now in the next cycle. The new year is the next cycle of that solar round of the solar system, of us moving around, dancing around the sun, etc. And that's what makes it a new year. The beginning of the rise into spring and summer. As we go back towards a closer relationship with the sun, we get closer to the sun, so it becomes spring and then summer, etc., etc. This other New Year's that we're indoctrinated into, and I say that because I feel that's what happened to me when I was a kid. I was told that the end of the year was December 31st. That's New Year's Eve, and then January 1st is the beginning of the new year, that Gregorian calendar. And that's what most people are still tuned into, if they bother at all. I know for a lot of people now, these kind of celebrations don't mean as much as they used to. Maybe that's an ageism thing or a generational thing. I don't know. I haven't been out to a New Year's party for a number of years. I just don't bother with them anymore. Mainly because I'm not really into that kind of partying. I've done that loads. I did it loads and loads when I was younger. I just can't be arsed anymore. I'd rather have a nice cup of coffee and a nice sit down, a slice of cake, get my slippers. So for me, that level of you have to go out and celebrate the end of Saturnalia. I know it's sort of merging and mixing a bit there. It's more the general party atmosphere that is promoted, although we do still have some more traditional approaches, such as hogmanay and other ways that people get together as social groups to celebrate the fact that they've got through another year and they're looking forward to the next year, and they're hoping, their intention is focused on, we're going to have a good year this year. This year is going to be great. Have a happy new year. So for a lot of people, they are, there's still a little bit of that traditional element of what the solstice round was about. You have survived the darkness of winter. You should lift your hopes up because now it's going to be approaching spring and summer. The light is returning. But for most of the contemporary modern world now, it's not really about that. It's just about partying. It's just about hedonism. And just saying that alone makes me saying, oh, you're one of those old fuckers that just moans and complains about the kids of today. Well, yeah, there's that. But I think there's far more to it than that. There is a reality to the level of escapism that is attached to most of these holidays and celebrations now. It's not really so much about the original element that led to it becoming a holy day or holiday. Instead, it's just about, forget about your worries, forget about your strife, be happy, just celebrate your lifestyle, give each other presents, buy each other stuff to celebrate your commercialism lifestyle that you've been indoctrinated into, grown up into. It is indoctrination. Being pedantic about it, it is indoctrination, but it has become so subtly woven into the fabric of society that people find it hard to even comprehend it, let alone see it as being deliberate indoctrination. The corporatist structure has become so vast and so far-reaching that you don't notice that you're being grown in a cage that encourages you to celebrate the accumulation of useless crap rather than your own healthy existence, well-being, happiness, and all the usual kind of good stuff that people want out of life. Because they need you to keep consuming, because that's the structure they built to deliberately be fueled by that process of consumption. It's led to a lot of advances and a lot of rising up of living standards, but are you really raising your living standard if the standard you are now living to is mental illness? Sort of paraphrasing a little bit that Jiddu Krishnamurti quote, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. You're raising your standard of living. That just means you have more comfortable slaves, more comfortable crazy people. You've got a society full of crazy people, but at least they get a meal every day. How is that raising living standards? You've got a society full of crazy people, but at least all of them have got a mobile phone. Their living standards are so high. Yeah, okay. A society full of crazy people armed with mobile phones. What could happen? Well, what's the worst that could happen? But anyway, I've already started digressing and rambling. So I'll try and get into what I wanted to mention. Let me just have another quick check in the chat. I did send out a few invites. Steve, if you want to come and join in, you're very welcome to join in. Right, I sent you an invite on your Skype. Because I'm going to mention some of the stuff from the last show you did about friendship, but it also links to some of the stuff that happened in the previous show with some of the things that were going on in the chat and whatever. But I think it's relevant at the moment because of a lot of the other stuff that's happening in the background. It's a little bit sort of housekeeping, as in me sort of letting people know what's going on with my channel and stuff like that. but at the same time, it links into this environment and how this environment is being affected and messed with by some elements that are deliberately there to just try and fuck with shit for various reasons. But I'll come back to that. Freedom of ideas is a wonderful gift. It gives the opportunity to illuminate the infinite stupidity of the human mind and expose the offensive. Yeah. I do wonder sometimes if the purpose, if there is any real genuine purpose to it, to the existence of things such as that kind of corporatist, institutionalized dominance of a parasitic structure, is deliberately because it acts as like a draw. It draws out the poisonous. It exposes the poisonous. Yeah, I'll come back to that because it sort of gets into talking about centralization, which I know I've mentioned many times, but I'll try and explain myself first with why I've got this particular title this week. The subtitle was just Leaving This Year, because depending on how long my voice lasts and how long I can ramble for, I don't know if I'll reach midnight, maybe. See what happens. But yeah, this is the, well, you know, like I said earlier, at the end of time, there are no more dates on the calendar. So we are leaving this year. We're currently in the process of exiting this year. It's a yexit. The year is being exited. But yeah, the main title, To Figure Your Head. And I've been thinking about this kind of stuff recently, inspired by listening to other people, listening to Steve's shows. Steve Tagoose, go and check his channel out. He's posted in the chat, so you can find his channel from his name in the chat box. But listening to what Steve was saying recently, and other people as well, I listen to quite a lot of different channels. I've got some that are my sort of regulars, the ones that I go and listen to quite often. I listen to most of their content, listen or watch, whatever, you know, it is, however it is they put their stuff out. And I do jump around a bit. And I will, despite what a lot of people might think, and this has a lot to do with perception in this environment. This environment is very much about perception and the manipulation of people's perception. But there is this often encountered, speaking from my own point of view, I encounter this fairly often, people's expectation or belief that I don't look at anything that opposes my own points of view. So in other words, if I sort of talk about geoengineering, I've never looked at anything to do with debunking the idea of chemtrails and geoengineering. You know, I've never looked at things that supposedly debunk a lot of the stuff I talk about. It's like, now you're scrabbling for anything that you can use as an excuse to deny what I'm saying. That's what it comes down to. And these kind of things have been popping up quite often recently. And this is why it leads me to talking about to figure your head and trying to explain what I mean by that and what it is I'm trying to point at, or the various ideas I'm pointing at. Part of this, it's the housekeeping. If any of you out there get any emails from an address that begins paul.cook1, I think it's paul.cook1 at Virgin. It was an email address I had many years ago. I don't use that service anymore, so that email address is not mine anymore. Virgin know this, the company knows this, so they know it's not me. But somebody has been using that address and they've been posting out spam mail. And I know about this because the redirects somehow have ended up coming back to me. So I've been getting the redirect notices saying, oh, your attempt to send this message to such and such address has bounced back because the content contains spam. And that's why I've got to mention this, because let people know, if you get an email from that address, don't open it. Don't click on anything in it. Don't click on any attachments or shit like that. Just ignore it. Just delete it. Just get rid of it. Block it. Whatever. And this is part of the elements of there are people that are deliberately trying to mess with shit in this environment for whatever their reasons. And there are potentially multiple reasons why. It doesn't mean they are lizards or secret agents or aliens or any other crazy shit. They're bound to have reasons that they're doing their thing, but they are there and they are doing that kind of shit. So there's that element that was sort of like housekeeping, and I've got to let people know about that just in case you get some weird random message or some kind of spam. Somebody, I think mainly what they're probably trying to do is phishing. And I think this comes from the element of, because recently I distanced myself a bit more from some of the sort of group stuff that happens in this environment. I basically just took a step back from a lot of the involvement that I had with the social grouping of people that create content or get involved with doing this kind of YouTube stuff. And there's various reasons for that. It's not like I'm trying to point blame at anyone in particular. It's nothing to do with blaming someone in particular. It's just about the reality, I feel. What is the reality of when you're coming into an environment that is about being publicly visible, being a public face that people can tune into or not if they choose to. That gives you a potential to create influence, and that is something that the system doesn't like. They're quite happy if you just talk about banal things, talk about kittens, talk about your favourite fashions, talk about your favourite movies, whatever. They don't, obviously they're not bothered about that. It's not a threat to them. If anything, that's reinforcing their corporatist commercialized system. So they want people to do that kind of shit. But if you're doing something that is considered by the system anyway as being potentially a threat or potential to lead towards a threat, or it's sedition, or it's rebellion, there's loads of different names they can throw at it. It's terrorism, all that kind of usual shit that they do. Then they will make efforts to sideline you or to cul-de-sac you, as the terminology grew over the last several years. Just the very fact that there is terminology for this stuff now, as far as I'm concerned, that alone proves that this stuff is happening. We can argue endlessly about, can you provide the proof? Can you show us the documents? Can you show us the data traces of all this stuff? It's like, you're talking about dealing with the agencies of governments and institutions that have an unlimited amount of wealth and resources available to them. But you want little old me to be able to counteract these agencies such that I can present to you, undisputable proof. It's like that scene in Batman where the guy that works at Wayne Enterprises figures out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and he tries to tell someone. He's like, what? You're accusing a multimillionaire of doing this kind of stuff? Are you crazy? But to me, that is the thing about perception as well. There is a lot of perception that comes into this environment that is like baggage that we all bring with us from our standardized education or our cultural upbringing, based in wherever you live geographically, what culture you grow up in, etc. There's elements of baggage that are unhelpful, and if anything, they are counteractive. They work against you when you repeat them in this environment. If you're genuinely here with the intention of looking for information, looking for knowledge, empowering yourself, helping yourself and helping others, if you have those kind of intentions, then you need to be able to do things such as put down your expectation that everybody you encounter will be perfect and infallible, because that's just not reality. Put down your expectation that the face on the screen that you're looking at or listening to is now your new authority. So it's going to be that face that tells you what to do and what to think instead of the face on the TV screen. You need to put down that kind of expectation, that baggage. If we're going to be able, I'm talking from my point of view, my hopes, my intentions, and some of the stuff that, as far as I'm concerned, these are the kind of things that I work towards, as in, I'm trying to add fuel to this kind of element rather than, just ignoring it like most people do. But if we are going to be able to continue having free speech, and I put the bunny ears on it because, we can debate semantically about what is free speech and whether there is truly free speech. But having this ability to be able to communicate with each other and share ideas and share information. The recent yellow vest actions and activities in France have been a good example, again, because there's been others over recent years, but a good example again of how when the people start getting together and doing their own thing, in terms of creating an action or an event such that it throws a spanner in the works of the system and reveals the tyranny, protest action, stuff like that, then the system will try to inhibit the movement of information about those events. It's just tactical common sense as far as the system is concerned. If something is going on in a town that is successfully fucking up their system and bringing people together such that they're starting to figure things out for themselves and maybe even starting to interact such that they're like, well, how can we do without these governmental fuckers? Oh no, let's get together and organise amongst ourselves and we don't need them. When that kind of shit starts happening, that's a threat to the very existence of the system. So therefore it has to react to it. And its easiest reaction is to isolate that activity, the information about that activity, from spreading anywhere else, because otherwise it will, become like a virus and it will spread and it will eat away at the system. A lot of this connects very well into the talk about revolution and that kind of approach that is being deliberately pushed in recent years, the attempt to make people enact their own phoenix principle such that they will, burn down their own society so that then the controllers, the usurpers, or whatever you want to call them, can step in and go, oh, we can build a new thing for you now. But the system is inevitably going to try and interrupt communication. And in this environment where YouTube began as a public service platform, it was about allowing people a video space where they could just do whatever they want, talk about whatever they want. If they want to play music, they play music. If they want to dance or paint or just talk, they've got a space where they can do that and it can be publicly accessible. It was a creator community back when it began, like a lot of stuff on the internet. Good ideas begin organically, and then the system comes along and goes, oh, that's making a lot of money. And it's causing a lot of stir. It's creating a lot of influence. Or we'll have to appropriate that, make sure we get it under control so it doesn't become a threat. And now, several years later, we're in this situation where the digital fences are being closed in. So it's getting harder and harder to actually reach the general public, and you are being actively cul-de-saced. And that means the system doesn't mean there's an agent sitting there watching everything you do and saying, no, I won't allow him to say that, I won't allow him to say that, I block that. These are algorithmic systems built into the infrastructure that all they need to do is put a flag next to your account, and that flag will inform the software to add a certain weight to your content such that it gets buried, it gets sunk into the data. And when there is literally millions of hours of content being uploaded onto YouTube on a daily basis, when you say sunk, that means you ain't going to be seen by the general public. people have to actually actively dig to find your content, and they'll probably end up having to jump across several stepping stones from the higher levels, in terms of up towards the surface layer of the trending crap. They're going to have to dig their way down several levels, jumping off stepping stones to find their way to your content. So they'll encounter one fairly mainstream channel, and there might be a few loosely connected links, and in that manner, eventually, they'll get to your content. But in terms of you being generally visible to the public, nah. You're so far in the background, you're not even a dot on the horizon. You're just white noise in the background. But anyway, I am digressing myself again. What's that got to do with figuring your head? To figure your head. A lot of this stuff has been building up over recent years to the point where now you will encounter more efforts made to disrupt what you are doing. It's not so much that they will outright shut you down. Some people will be just outright shut down. Some content just gets blocked, removed, the channel gets shut down. The individual who was setting up the channel gets their IP blocked. They're basically just not allowed to use or access YouTube anymore. That will happen. That does happen. But the numbers that happens to aren't as big demographically as the numbers that suffer this kind of cul-de-sacking effect, shadow banning, where they leave you with the impression that you are actually making normal use of the service that they offer to provide you, that you are publicly available, that if you put in the time and effort and you create content that people appreciate, you will get the audience. The audience will come and listen or look at what you're creating because that's what they want to look at. Yeah. They give you this impression that you have that opportunity, but the reality of it is your content is being monitored by those algorithmic systems. It doesn't need an individual to sit there stalking you, but your content is monitored, and if it hits certain key phrases or keywords or flags that are programmed into it, you will gradually get sidelined and you'll disappear into the ether. So you carry on doing your thing thinking, yeah, I'm doing my thing, man, I'm doing my channel, but I don't seem to be getting any response. It's almost as if nobody can hear me. That's because they've just buried you. And in that way, it gives them, YouTube in particular, Google, Alphabet, the corporate structure, it gives them the plausible deniability to be able to say, well, we're not blocking you. We're not stopping you from doing your thing. Look, we're providing you with the service where you can do it. They'll just deny it. And again, I'd reference what I was saying earlier about you finding evidence of agents actively messing with your shit. You're going to be able to find the evidence to give categorical proof that Google has set up an infrastructure that does this. You will find it, I think, pretty much impossible. Some quite clever and talented people have attempted to gather that kind of evidence or information, and you get bits of it, but you couldn't put it together as a case and take it to court and do something about it or anything like that. It just ain't going to happen. So in this environment, and this some of this comes from listening to what Steve was talking about on your last Saturday show, talking about friendship, but also what you talked about anthropomorphism and personification. And it brought me back to that manipulating people's perceptions. As I said about the baggage kind of thing, people have a lot of expectations when they begin their process, such that they actively start choosing for themselves to look at and listen to and read some content that may be presenting ideas and information to them that rock their foundations, that shake up their worldview. They're doing that by their own intent. They're choosing to pursue that because that kind of information is not going to be readily presented to you by the system. They don't want people getting into that because it works against the status quo. But when people begin that process, this environment now, how to describe it? There is an expectation that is encouraged by the system, that is that baggage that is brought over into this environment. This environment has the opportunity to be an open, decentralized platform of learning and information and creative ideas and sharing those ideas. But instead, that has to be formulated to suit the status quo and to not create a potential threat to that status quo. So it has to be managed. Like I've described it before, it's like the bonsai tree. You know, they're shaping it to make it a certain shape. If you think of the interconnectedness of the internet, and the way it is sort of like a tree shape, you know, all the little branches connecting off together. And services like Google are very much that kind of branched network shape. They are trimming the edges to make sure that people can't go certain directions, or they get turned back. They get sent round a U-bend and sent back the way they came. And as part of that, they actively encourage people's baggage. So you're indoctrinated with this concept of authority where whoever it is who's standing at the front of the class, or at the, you know, the head of the workbench, you know, the team leader on the workbench, they are the authority, and they are the ones that you will just subjugate yourself to. And you are expected, you are trained to accept what they say to you without question. They might get you to ask some questions, but they will be within boundaries. And you know, it's that kind of indoctrination of authority in the first place. You know, you can help people learn to appreciate the use of knowledge and skill and talent, what could be defined as authority within a subject. You know, a professor is an authority on their chosen subject. A blacksmith is an authority on making metal hardware, iron and steel, etc. So in that use of the word, yeah, authority can be good, but in the use of blind, controlling dominance, that kind of authority, that kind of top-down principle is harmful, because it teaches people to be subordinate, to be robotic, to be programmable repeaters that react to certain button expectations. You know, I've spoken before about the use of symbolism and how a lot of information and ideas can be compacted into one simple image, one hieroglyphic symbol. You know, think of like a company logo, a brand logo, stuff like that. And that body of information, that logos of information that is carried by that symbol, can initiate multiple cues within somebody's mind. It can even initiate chemical release. You know, they can give you dopamine hits just by showing you symbols that you've been trained to love what that symbol represents. You know, you could apply that to most religious symbols and occultic symbols as well, yeah. But that element of them encouraging the baggage in people to permeate through this environment just as much as it is in the standardized education system, so it perpetuates the security of the control structure, the security of the status quo. You know, this environment is not going to have or be allowed to have the potential to actually help people expand their minds and think beyond the simplistic and childish expectations or subordinations and loss of their own sovereignty, their own cognitive liberty. The system's quite happy to do that. So it encourages people to do things such as look at the face on the screen and expect from that face the same level of authority that you get from, you know, a scientist wearing a white coat and holding a clipboard, because they're on a screen. So therefore, they must be some kind of authority. They're speaking publicly. Therefore, there must be some kind of authority. That is the indoctrination that is constantly enforced into us, because that's what the status quo needs us to have in our minds, so that whenever one of them chooses to start giving us all orders about what we should be doing, we just straight away go, oh yes sir, thanks sir, I'll go and do that right now sir. That kind of, like, I defined it as a parroting response, a robotic response to button pressing or cues. So those kind of expectations. Now, to connect it back to what Steve was talking about last Saturday about friendship, somebody put in the chat box that night as well, last Saturday, that it should be unconditional. Friendship should be unconditional. And I just thought that's crazy. That is either delusional, or you're being deliberately manipulative because you're trying to use guilt to force somebody to be your friend. No. That's not how it works. I know for a lot of people, and you know, I include myself in this, for a lot of us, being truly honest with yourself can be quite difficult. The truth of things can be unpleasant, and you often have to give up bullshit once you see that truth. If you actually accept it and, you know, pick it up and move with it, then you have to give up your bullshit. Yeah, and that can be difficult. That can be painful. That can be humiliating. It can be depressing, etc., etc. But if you're really pursuing the truth, then that's how you go. Yeah? But that demand is unrealistic, and it's not honest. The demand that friendship is unconditional, it's not true. I'm quite happy. People disagree with me. If you've got a different point of view, I'm speaking from my own experiences, my own knowledge base, my own point of view, etc., etc. That's part of the baggage again, yeah? The expectation that I'm some kind of expert or authority on shit, and that just because I say it, it has to be so. This is me, just me talking. But that demand that friendship is unconditional, is unrealistic. I think it was Aristotle, if I can remember the quote, I'll paraphrase it a bit, but everybody's friend is nobody's friend. You cannot be a friend to everybody, because that defeats the definition of friendship. Friendship means you have a relationship with somebody where you show them more favor than you show to the rest of the general populace. So if you was in a situation where you had one chocolate bar that you could give away, and in front of you was one of your friends and one person that you've never met before, they're totally random, stranger, general populace, you're more likely to give that chocolate bar to your friend, because you have an ongoing relationship with them such that you show them more favor than everybody else. We can all be, you know, compassionate. I think compassion, it's fair enough to say compassion is or can be unconditional. Love can be unconditional. But friendship in reality is not unconditional. We all make judgments constantly. You know, there's this other idea that being judgmental is bad. Being overly judgmental is bad. You know, using your judgmental ideas to berate or abuse other people can be bad. But we all make judgments constantly. Every moment of the day, you are making judgments. Can I reach that coffee cup? Oh, yes, I can. I judge that I could do it. I judge that it would taste of coffee. So this idea of unconditional friendship is just not a reality. And a lot of people come into this environment and gravitate towards groupings They congregate into groupings because that's what we do. We're social beings. If you're a loner, you wouldn't be doing this kind of stuff on the internet. Yeah, you probably wouldn't, have an avatar or an account or anything. You'd just lurk and watch and stay on your own. But people tend to gravitate into groups, and in those groups, they form friendships, and there'll be different layers of friendships. Some will be close friendships, some will just be a friendly relationship, as in, well, I don't have anything against the bloke and I have a good chat with him whenever I speak with him, so he's a mate, he's a friend. That doesn't mean you trust him with your newborn baby, him or her. It's not gender specific. We can have Apache helicopters in there as well if you want. But that kind of relationship, a friendship relationship, is based on trust, and trust is built over time, and it is not unconditional. Trust is not unconditional. It defeats the definition of trust if you say it's unconditional. I trust that you will do a particular thing, or I trust that the government will react in a certain way. It's just a level of confidence, and if that confidence is not met, then the conditions haven't been met. But we all judge each other, we judge ourselves, we judge the world around us, and it brought into question that element of judging and definitions. But I'll come back to that when I try and finish explaining the main title. But I think it's worth mentioning the other stuff now first. Some of in the show you did previously, I'm talking to Steve, sorry, Steve Taguchi's show that he did a couple of weeks ago. There was some stuff posted in the chat that night as well that was just a bit like, man, now they're getting desperate. Somebody was trying to imply that I was Steve's co-host, which is just sort of like, right, okay, Steve's got his show that he does, his mystery show. I do this show. We interact with each other. Occasionally, I might go on, well, I have done in the past, I'll go on a show that Steve's doing and we'll chat. I think I've done it twice. I've gone on one of Steve's shows and chatted. And a few times in the past, Steve's come on to one of our broadcasts and chatted with us. So there's no co-hosting involved. But this is part of the indication to me, and I'm quite happy to say this is just my perception of things, but I feel that these things should be pointed out because this is how this environment is being fucked with deliberately. But there was that seeming need for that particular commenter to create some kind of close or conspiratorial connection between Steve and myself. Why? Why did they feel a need to do that? Was it just because they wanted, by implication, to suggest in the viewer or the reader's mind that there was something untoward going on? There was some kind of bad manipulative shit going on. And this is the kind of, like I said, the subtle messing with this environment. They're not outright blocking you, but they're coming at you in such a way that they derail what you're doing. You're doing your broadcast, you're talking about, let's say, part of what you were talking about, anthropomorphism, and the conversation or the stuff being posted in the chat is about, like, they're working, they're in on it together, they're working on it together, he's his co-host. It's like, what's that got to do with what the guy's talking about? This then gets to the point of a naivety or a expectation, baggage again from the system, that, in this environment, everybody must be perfect. Everybody must be lovely and great and fantastic and only have the best in mind for the people who look at their content. There's a lot of people in this environment that just take the piss out of you, the audience. There's a lot of people in this environment that just exploit you. They just want to eke money out of you. They want to squeeze every potential penny out of you they can in whatever way they can using this medium. They'll quite happily con you, trick you. That's reality. You get the same thing, in your general society. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's immaculate. The internet is not immaculate because it's people that are doing this content. It's people creating this stuff. So therefore, you have that fallibility element of people. But that expectation that, I'll come in here and I expected everybody to be wonderful and nice and lovely and only have the best intentions for me. You'd just taken the shit about your own government, where you lived in an infantile delusion that your government is people who actually care for your well-being, and you just transferred it to a new face. You haven't worked your way through that delusion. You just changed who it is that you are deluded about. That can also be applied to the kind of guru worship elements that you get in this environment. That as well it's become a misnomer. A lot of people don't really know what a guru is. They haven't looked at the cultures where that kind of element grew within the society of that culture. Instead, they just go, oh, he's a guru. And so what do you mean? Do you really mean the actual, the definition that comes from the origin of that word? Or are you just giving this kind of contemporary, simplified definition that represents anybody who talks or presents themselves publicly, who has this desire or need to have a little group of sycophantic followers that, worship everything they do? Look at Instagram. Fuck, it's just filled with that shit. So, hey, folks, look at me. This is me by the lamppost. This is me by the toilet. Look at my dinner. Look at my pint of beer. Look at me. Look at me. Look. Everybody can be a fucking guru now if that's the definition of guru. It's not. It's fucking narcissism. That's nothing to do with being a guru. That's just being a narcissist. Guru, in its simplest definition, means teacher. So aren't you contradicting yourself when you say, oh, these people are just gurus? Oh, you mean they're teachers? So in other words, they're teaching people something. So you think what they're saying is valuable because, it has to be valuable, otherwise they wouldn't be considered a teacher. You wouldn't call them a teacher if they were just spouting gibberish. You don't learn anything from gibberish. So therefore, that's not a teacher. All these manipulations with language and expectations and perception. And the reason why I say it, I do think there is a few people who they turn up every so often. Sometimes I think they're just lurking most of the time. They probably, they notice that we're doing broadcasts, but they don't necessarily tune in unless they've got something in particular that they're trying to achieve. But they turn up and they try to, put out this kind of, it's not even, I can't say like accusations, because they're not even accusations. They're just implied misdeeds. I want to sow this seed of doubt in your mind. Let me take a big shit in your head so that all you can smell is that turd. And a lot of the time, that's all they do. They'll turn up in a chat and they'll just go, oh, I just dropped a big turd on your carpet. There you go. Now I'm off again. I ain't going to listen to any of your content. I'm not watching your show. I just turned up to do a big shit in your chat room. I'm generalizing a bit, if you go to some of the bigger channels, the broadcasts that get thousands of viewers, their chat rooms can be just absolutely crazy. You get just a stream of just crap flying by. But when it comes to the smaller channels, places where you tend to get more of a genuine, organic gathering or congregating of people, you get more genuine interaction in the chat boxes. That's when that kind of stuff stands out a mile as being deliberately done for manipulative or malicious reasons. They're trying to mess with your shit. It might be that they're just trying to mess with you personally. They want to, try and rent some space in your head, because that's part of what a lot of these people do. They are basically just sadists. They get their jollies from just making people miserable. There are actively groups of people that seek to cause others to commit suicide. People think that's just like an urban myth or something. It's not. There are groups of people who roam around the internet trying to find unbalanced or people who are in a bad way, and they harass them and they try to drive them to suicide. That kind of shit takes place in YouTube just as much as it does on other platforms. Another side note on that, I know I mentioned this a while ago, but you sometimes encounter when people come into a chat and they try to grab all the attention. And one of the ways they'll often try and grab attention is by talking about that kind of subject, but as if like they're threatening it. Right? Oh, if you don't love me, I'm going to kill myself. You claim that you're a loving person, but so you have to love me. They're trying to use your own good intentions against you. This is part of the methodology, the psychological methodologies that these people are trained to use, or if they are just sadists, they learn to use through practice. They've been doing this to other people since they were little kids. They learn how to be good tormentors, as in good at what they're doing. They learn how to find people's buttons and keep prodding and prodding and prodding until they make them angry, and then they make them madder and madder, and etc., etc. But it got me thinking about a lot to do with like I say, the perception of this environment, the expectations that a lot of people seem to struggle with, and I don't exclude myself from that. I'm doing that. I am doing that. I have been doing that for years now. I'm still going. But yeah, a lot of those kind of expectations that end up debilitating the potentiality of this medium. This is an environment where if you want to, you can learn about any topic, any subject. You can watch people who are good at a particular skill demonstrate how they do what they do. You learn how to repair an engine, learn how to build almost anything, except maybe probably a nuclear bomb. I'm sure they probably wouldn't put that on there. But, this format has immense potentiality to be beneficial to people. But instead, they've been slowly, systematically turning it into, it's either ridiculous banality circus, or it's this shadow banned cul-de-sac dark part of YouTube. It's like, oh, I'm in the wrong part of YouTube again. That's even become a bit of a cliche, because people have learned that, oh, there's some places on YouTube where you might encounter somebody talking about crazy ideas. It's like, you mean you never encountered anybody like that in just everyday life? You never bumped into somebody or sat next to someone on the bus and they're telling you about something crazy, and you sit there and go, are you on day release, mate? I hope you've had your medication today. Now I know more, I'd say that'd be exactly the wrong thing to happen. But yeah, just to make a point. So I wanted to mention all this stuff because I thought it was relevant in terms of, like connecting it into what I was saying about the housekeeping. I know, I have confidence that there are some people, I'm pretty certain it's not just one, there are a little network of people that are deliberately trying to create schisms within this group of people that have organically got together and do this kind of stuff. People who are, as far as I'm concerned anyway, they're genuine content creators. I might not necessarily agree on all their ideas or ideologies or points of view, but they are genuine content creators in it. It's their stuff, it's their ideas, it's their content that they're putting out there. They're not working for some agency, they're not a COINTEL, they're not a Pied Piper or any shit like that. There is a network of people that interact with each other, that are those smaller channels that don't get much public viewing. They're cul-de-saced or they're pushed to the back because what they talk about makes too many people uncomfortable or offended. That stuff is happening. I've seen it recently, and part of why I like to mention this stuff is because I've learned in the past when you get people who are trying to mess with you or troll you or stalk you in that kind of fashion, one of the best ways to deal with it is to bring it out into the light. Put it in front of everybody else. You know, if somebody gets in touch with you and says, I need to talk to you privately about so-and-so person, and then they want to speak to you, just you and them, and they tell you this story about how they know that the other person is bad for this, that, and the other reason. If they know that the other person is bad, why can't they say that in front of multiple people, in front of multiple witnesses? It's because a liar relies on having individual relationships with each person that he or she passes the lie to, because then they can manage the information level of each person, so that they can have one lie running with one person and another lie running with somebody else, and those two people never encounter each other, and they don't know that the liar is lying to both of them. You know, an easy way or a good way to deal with that is bring it out into the light, say it in front of multiple people. That way, you'll be surprised just how often, and I know because I've done this a few times in the past, you'll be surprised just how often people step forward and go, hang on a minute, he said that to you. He told me something completely different. You know, or what evidence you got that? Oh, right, here's the text from the chat we were having about that thing, whatever it was. You know, it's another element that makes me laugh a bit with some of these people who are just the sad sadists. They're doing all this shit in an environment where at the moment that kind of bullying or hate speech or harassment is very much on the agenda for the government to crack down on, because it suits their agendas. Yeah, it suits their narrative. They want to be able to say, oh, look, there's these bad people online, so therefore we need to have more control of what goes on online so that we can deal with these bad people. So they're shooting themselves in the foot. When they go around doing this kind of harassment to others, they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's the only way I can explain it. It's like, do you not get that by your own actions, you're enabling the restrictions of your own actions? By being a dick to other people, they're going to come along and slap you on the dick, as in the authorities. And they think they're clever by using sock accounts and shit like this. And it's like, the authorities, the agencies, the corporations that run these businesses can look at all your information, mate. So you're there thinking, oh, I need to create a new character profile tonight, so when I go and hassle Cookie, he'll think it's a completely different person because now I've got this new sock account that I can harass him with. And the agencies know that it's you. So when the bar gets pushed further and further along, so that now they're not only looking for the the terrorists posting stuff online, they're looking for anyone that can be classified as a bully, harassing people. And that means you're going to be included in that new demographic. So they're going to come looking for you, and they'll trace all your activity, and they'll go, yeah, we see you made that sock account there, you made that one there, and you use them to harass this person. You're dumb. You are dumb. Yeah, but I think again, something I just feel I've learned over the years is most sadists are dumb. The worst kind are the clever ones, because they think up very clever ways to torment people. Yeah, a lot of high-level psychopaths are that kind of clever sadist. They enjoy causing causing harm to others in that kind of way, especially in a psychological way, gaslighting, stuff like that. But most of them are just, they're like petty children that just like picking on others. You know, there is that truism that children can be brutal. Yeah, when kids start taking the mickey out of each other, when you first start attending usual school, and this is how it was for me in the UK anyway. Yeah, and from sorry, coughing at you. From a lot of people I've chatted with over the years, they've had similar experiences at school. Yeah, kids can be brutal to each other. They'll come up with the worst nicknames. They'll come up with the most horrid things to say to each other, just to have a go at each other. You know, it's part of a learning process of finding boundaries or developing boundaries. But you know, often it comes across to me that the majority of the people who are supposedly adults who go around doing this kind of shit are, in their minds, in their spirits, they're still just little children playing out those same games. They seem to have issues of a parental nature, either mummy issues or daddy issues, such that they are still playing out the shadow work that they never managed to achieve with their parents, so instead they project it out onto others. They use you as the whipping post to try and deal with their own demons. Right, so anyway, so hopefully I've encapsulated why I'm referencing some of what Steve was talking about, and some of the stuff I saw in the chat. And it's not, like I say, it's not just, I'm not picking Steve in particular. It's, you know, he's one of the people I watch regularly, so I've seen this stuff there, but I've been seeing it in other places as well. This is something that has been bubbling away for years now, but it's got to the stage now where it's become industrialized. You know, now it is just, that's the way it is. I know forever the internet has had trolls, but now it has become this methodical, subtle, deliberate, constant push towards derailing what you're doing, distracting your content, or, you know, disrupting your content that you're trying to output. Or if they can't do that, or if they, you know, that's not achieving what they want, then they start trying to just disrupt your life in general, disrupt your psychology, disrupt your well-being. This is like divide and conquer on a very subtle psychological level. It's not about making you feel a very distinct difference between you and other people. It's just about constantly reinforcing the bullshit that's been given to you by the system since you were a kid. You know, what do you mean you're talking about this shit? You're not an expert. You shouldn't be allowed to talk. You don't know fuck all, mate. You don't know what you're talking about. Constantly belittling. Some people know more than others. Some people know less. I'm talking as if like, I'm talking to the person being the abuser. You know, you have this expectation that people have to, you know, they have to fit a certain mark, a certain blueprint. That's very eugenicist of you. You not see how that's been put into your head by the system, because it then reinforces the slaves constantly bickering with each other so that they don't look to the slave master. They don't attack the slave master because they're too busy attacking each other. You're not as good as me, mate, because you haven't got, you know, whatever, a car or a watch, or, you know, all the usual kind of expectations of value. I can dismiss everything you say because you wear a silly hat. You've got a beard, therefore you're the enemy. You know, all that kind of you know, really simplistic, but it's become endemic in this environment. And now we've got this, you know, over the last year, it's become so ridiculous. It's like this culture of offense. Pretty much you can guarantee it doesn't matter what you do or say. You can be the nicest, sweetest person ever, and somebody will come along and go, "You are so horrible. You're so horrible." It's just, now we are past the Rubicon. I think I said that a while ago. Yeah. I think we crossed the Rubicon a while ago, and it's been this descent into chaos, deliberately for problem, reaction, solution, but descent into chaos. So, yeah, talking about that kind of stuff, and the anthropomorphism and personification and that baggage expectation, the perceptions of people in general that are given to them, that are molded by the system itself. The system has a figure, you know, a shape. Let's get into that. What does the word figure mean? You know, it's got a couple of meanings. And that was partly what got me thinking about this, is because there are two different meanings to figure. There's the, let's stick that up, hopefully you can see that on the screen share. Yeah, oh, don't get the infinite screen. There's the numerical value as a figure. Yeah, a number is a figure. But there's also the element of shape. Really, that's what it's about. It's about the shape of something. And over time, the word has sort of developed in its use to include a few other things and, you know, be more attributed to the human form, the figure of a human. You know, she's got a nice figure, all that kind of stuff. But really, it's about the shape of something. And as a verb, it's a bit more sort of that meaning. You know, they talked about to represent or make a likeness to have a certain shape or appearance. So it's about, where's the bit? I'm sure I saw something about Latin schema. I had a picture in the mind. Oh, to work out a sum. I can't see where it is now. I'm trying to read it fast. But anyway, yeah, I think, or was it from the Greek? Sorry, the Greek schema. Oh, there it is. Yeah, to translate to Greek, schema. And a schema is more like a plan drawing, or an engineering drawing, a geometrical drawing, an architectural drawing. You know, a schema is a plan. But the way it's described when I was reading, I thought, yeah, that suits exactly what I was thinking. I got the numerical value, which is to create a definition of a numerical value. You know, so the figure 8 is 8 times something. It's 8 things. 8 apples equals the figure 8. That number, that figure represents those 8 things. But at the same time, it can be applied to any shape. She has a good figure. It had the figure of a lion. You know, to see shapes in clouds, and you can say it has the figure of a whatever it is you think you see. You know, that made me think about the definition. What you're talking about here is to figure, is to equate a definition, or to calculate a definition. You know, like working out a sum. You do that working out of the sum and you get the numerical figure. So you've calculated the figure. You have defined the shape of it through your calculation. So in the same way, when it's applied to the physical form, or a form, you know, a bodily form, then you are defining the shape. The definition of the shape is the figure. So you figure it out by defining it. The definition is what you're figuring out. I thought it was good as well. It connects into figment, you know, which is a fragment of ment. Ment is mental, you know, of the mind. So it's a fragment within the mind. So to figure your head, you know, I was thinking about this from the point of view of the system creating methodologies, and you know, including that institutions. Sorry, I lost my chat room. Sorry, folks. I can see you again. Yeah, institutions that deal specifically with those areas of knowledge, as in, you know, how do we manipulate people? How do we psychologically affect them? How do we market to them? How do we socially engineer them, etc., etc.? You know, the system wants to survive, just like any other entity, because even though it's not a singular thing, it has the same metaphysical effect on us and our lives as an entity, as any other the entity has the potential to. So this thing wants to live and survive. So it needs you to stay where you are, to keep participating in it, to keep it alive. It only survives as long as you keep participating, you keep feeding it. You know, you're feeding it energy to keep it alive. So it wants you to stay there. So it wants to figure out how your mind works. It wants to define the shape of your mind, to figure your mind. You know, so when they talk about figure, the shape of something, They want to figure the shape of your mind, and that is that molding, the indoctrination, the bonsai effect of them making sure that you stay within the boundaries that they give you, because they're the ones creating the definition. Yeah, they're the ones drawing that shape to see that figure. So that then, and this is really a big part of the reason why the main title ended up worded the way I did it, to figure your head, because that had me as well at the same time thinking along the correlating lines that the system itself relies on figureheads to lead the people. So you have these authority figures, I've mentioned that a few times, the authority figures that represent to the general populace the elements that the system wants it to portray. So maybe this particular figurehead is supposed to demonstrate masculinity. So, they have the big warrior guy there who's, looking like he could kill a dragon, and that's the figurehead that they focus certain ideas and elements into. Remember what I said earlier about symbolism. Just because it's concentrated around a living being, i.e. this figurehead, this personage that they get to represent that role or to fill that role, it's still a symbol. The way it's being read by the viewer is the same way the viewer would read the information from a symbol. So when you see that classic cliched portrayal of the warrior imagery, you go, oh yeah, that's a warrior, therefore he represents that kind of warrior stuff. I know what I'm looking at. He's the symbol of warriors, figurehead. So are they talking about getting your head to fit a certain figure, shape, or are they talking about the shape they're representing to you is what your head is going to be? I know I'm being a bit obtuse, maybe a bit esoteric, but that's what I do. I don't see things in a simplistic fashion, maybe, or overcomplicate things, but it makes sense to me. So figurehead, let me just show you this because I think it's definitely important and relevant. Do another quick screen. Oh no, not that one. That one. Do another quick screen share. I don't do a lot of sharing of this kind of stuff because as part of that baggage of people's expectations in this environment, the system has been happily pushing the narrative over recent years that you can't believe anything anyone says unless they show you a bullet-pointed list of all the information and relevant evidence to prove their argument. Whereas you could just go and find that evidence for yourself. And oftentimes, a lot of the subject matters that I talk about, it's not really something that you can readily demonstrate the evidence for. And really, it's something that people need to see for themselves by their own investigations, using their own intention, their own free will choices of what direction they go when they're looking into information. They need to find this stuff out for themselves. You only really get truth when you find it for yourself. Somebody can point you in the direction, but until you go and stand on it for yourself, you don't really know what it is. Anyway, figurehead as an object. And this is what got me thinking about this, is the old tradition of the figureheads, which sort of culminated in the late medieval period, talking 16th, 17th century into the 18th century, where the big galleons, the big trading ships would have figureheads like this. Let's see if I can expand that. It's not a very good pic. Oh, that's better. Figureheads that represented something relevant to the culture of the people who produced the ship or owned it or whatever. They were like mascots, but it was more than just a mascot. This is something that has very deep roots. And, I'll read this one paragraph because I think this is the most relevant bit. In Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, it was once believed that spirits, fairies called kabutermanekis, example, gnomes, little men, or fairies, dwelt in the figureheads. The spirit guarded the ship from sickness, rocks, storms, and dangerous winds. If the ship sank, the kabutermanekis guided the sailors' souls to the land of the dead. To sink without a kabutermaneki condemned the sailor's soul to haunt the sea forever, or so Dutch sailors believed. A similar belief was found in early Scandinavia. And if you look into really all the religions include the element of water as being very important as a foundational element within the religion and a theological perspective. Water is very important to most early, I was going to say religions as well, but they're not necessarily religion on the scale of the big five, the modern contemporary big five. But even the ancient smaller belief systems had water as a very important element. It is to us as physical beings very important. So it's no wonder that it was important to people throughout the ages. But that importance transcends into their maritime endeavors, their boat building, their sailing, and the way they interacted with the waters they were sailing on, their local rivers and lakes, or out on the big ocean. And then you could even extend that into connections into what eventually becomes Admiralty law, and also things such as the Vatican's theological point of view of the ocean of the void, the Holy See. I know in being pedantic to what their own output is, that they don't call it the Holy See as in SEA, like a sea of an ocean. But I argue that really that is what they're talking about. The ocean of the void, where all our souls rise up out of, and then we are vessels upon that ocean. We are each vessels of the spirit of the Creator. And that is where they bring in the Admiralty law stuff and attempt to claim you as flotsam or jetsam. You are cargo in those vessels that have their figureheads on them. But the reason I wanted to talk about this and sort of connect it together in this way is because I felt it was a good way of pointing out that the ship would still work without the figurehead. The ship would still function without the figurehead. So what was the purpose of it? I'm asking it as a question in that way because, think for yourself. I'm sure there's lots of things you can come up with as, possibilities of why people do this. And there's various layers of that and nuance to it based on what culture they come from, the time it was happening in, blah, blah, blah. The availability of materials even, Maybe they only had a tiny little figurehead because they didn't have a lot of wood in the place where they come from. But I'm asking it because I feel it's very relevant when talking about the system, and as a demonstration of how, by the very reality that this environment is becoming more and more restrictive, that demonstrates that the system feels that what people are doing, what they're talking about, what they're interacting over is a threat to its own existence. Therefore, it needs to be controlled and managed, farmed. That is a proof that the society, I should say, the society can function without the figurehead. And the system knows that. So it's trying to protect its own existence. And that is demonstrated by its need to control this environment. Yeah, I think I said earlier, I personally would find it very difficult to be able to get you categoric evidence that says, oh, yeah, look, the agencies have been restricting this, that, and the other on the YouTube platform. I can't do that. I'm sure there's a few people out there that probably could get bits of that kind of information, but as I said, you'd never be able to get it into a court and get something done about it. The system needs this to be the way it is. That is just the tactical reality of it protecting its own existence. But I wanted to use this example, the concept of the figurehead and what is actually represented in that wording, and how the layers of those meanings, the symbology of what is represented within the logos of those words. It's not just talking about a wooden mannequin that gets strapped to the front of a ship. It was a supposedly, I was going to say, is this like an urban myth? But it's more like a sailor's myth. It's like an old sailor's myth that if the ship didn't have a figurehead, then they would find it difficult to do any long distance journeys because the crew would go mad. If they spent too much time at sea without the protection of that kind of spirit element that was embodied in the figurehead, then the whole crew would go crazy and they'd end up eating each other, and like the Marie Celeste kind of, they'd all just disappear, they'd all dive overboard and drown or some craziness. And is that just a myth deliberately propagated to encourage people, to indoctrinate people, to remain in that delusion that the only reason the ship works, the only reason the ship keeps sailing is because of the figurehead at the front of the ship? It's the figurehead that keeps it going. The only way you could accept or believe that or claim that as knowledge is if you had no concept or comprehension of how a ship works. If you were dumb enough to not be able to figure out how, talking about sailing ships in that kind of example of what they used to put figureheads on, modern ships have symbolic figureheads. It's not an actual, usually anyway, it's not an actual object on the front of the ship, but they have other symbols that are stuck on them that are supposedly a replacement for figureheads. But if you have an inability to figure out that the way the ship works can be explained, it will still be functional, even if you don't stick a figurehead on it, or if you take the figurehead off, it will still do what it was made to do. Then, what kind of situation is that? And to me, the only direction I could find to calculate that, to figure that situation out, was the only people it benefits are those that claim authority within that environment. So the captain, and his officers that control the ship. And you could say maybe, if there was a separate owner of the ship, maybe it belonged to a corporation or whatever, there's some other authority that claims ownership of that property. The only people who benefit from a situation where those who operate the vessel, those crew that are required to make it function, are deliberately kept dumb such that they can't figure out that it would function just the same if it had a figurehead or not. They need, this seems to be the argument, that these dumb people need a hierarchical structure that includes a totem fetish object, an idol that they can invest their spiritual expectation and intention into. So, the sailors get on board and they go, oh, it's all right, we've got a fantastic figurehead on this ship. We're going to be safe. We won't get sick. We won't get lost. You know, bless the figurehead, touch the figurehead to get blessed. Is there that kind of inner need? Do people truly go mad if they don't have that kind of totemistic thing to invest their expectations into? Or is, again, that just a myth that serves the purpose of those who benefit from a hierarchical system? The ship could still function having all captains on board. You know, if the whole ship was captains, if everyone on board was a captain, the ship could still be operated as long as the people who are there, the captains that are on board, are accepting of, are okay with it. It's like, okay, well, we can't all stand on the poop deck and, you know, steer the tiller. One of us will have to do the sails, one of us will have to do it. As long as they each accept taking a role within the functioning of that vessel, the vessel will still function. If you had everybody on board who was just a seaman, basic seaman, as they say, you know, it's the lowliest rank, the ship could still function. As long as they weren't expecting to do any, you know, like major calculating of navigation and shit, which would require a navigator or a captain or something like that. But, you know, that again is making a presumption on those average seamen not having the ability to do that kind of stuff. But if you took it from that hierarchical situation, to who does it benefit? It doesn't benefit the functioning of the ship. The ship could function just as well if it was a captain pulling the sails or if it was just the seaman pulling the sails. There's certain roles within the ship that require more knowledge or more specialized talents or skills or learning. But as long as those functions are fulfilled, the ship keeps sailing, with or without a figurehead. No, you know, part of this as well was the reason that I had this going round in my head, figuring in my head, calculating this stuff in my head. I didn't actually watch it because I just couldn't, because the kind of shit just makes me too angry. So I don't bother looking at it anymore. I've seen enough of that kind of stuff, so I don't need to hear it again and again and again. It's the same old shit. But I saw some of the pictures of it such that I could straight away see what people meant when they were posting pictures in complaint of this bullshit. But the Queen's message this year in the UK, the Queen's Christmas message, was her sat in a room of opulence in front of a big gold piano talking about how we all must pull together to survive the, you know, this time of difficulty and austerity. That kind of shit just makes me want to vomit. Yeah, and that's why I started thinking about this. Why have people got this delusion that we cannot exist as a society without these supposed figureheads? What function is it that they're serving you? Is it because it alleviates this infantile need for a parental figure to make you feel like mummy is in control of the country? Daddy is in control of the country. We'll all be okay because mummy and daddy are sat up there on the big poop deck navigating the country in the right direction. It's delusional. And again, I'd reference that Jiddu Krishnamurti quotes, no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. If the society we're living in is so sick that they need that level of delusion to keep them functioning, then what the fuck, we're in the shit. I'm not suggesting, you know, I've spoke about this recently as well, people talking about the revolution stuff because of the yellow vests and everything that's been going on. And there's been a fair amount of rhetoric deliberately building up again of people saying, you know, isn't it about time we got out in the streets and started hanging these politicians who are get out there and start fighting. It's exactly what the system wants. It will serve the purpose of the system. I've ranted a lot about this recently, but the point being, the reason I'm bringing it up again now is I'm not trying to suggest that people go to Buckingham Palace and start hanging all the royals or anything like that. We just need to evolve out of these delusions. We need to grow up out of these delusions. Giving people respect for their knowledge, their talents, their abilities, their wisdom, their intelligence, their ability to calculate, whatever you want to define it as, figure it as, giving people credit and applying that level of authority to them because they have shown themselves to be knowledgeable or skillful within a certain subject matter or productivity, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. That is useful to all of us. That is beneficial to all of us. But to have this unthinking, childlike expectation of authority or belief within authority that there is this figurehead who couldn't wash her own pants. She wouldn't be able to wash her own underwear. And yet you're supposed to put all your hopes, all your spiritual intention, all your energy into this expectation that she, like big mummy, is there to, with her hands around the entire country going, oh, let's all pull together in austerity. I'm with you as you go to the food bank. That is a profoundly sick society. I can see a potential. I'm just trying to be, I suppose, diplomatic and presenting a potential compromise. But I can see situations similar to other countries where the royal family becomes less empowered and takes much more of a background role, where they are more of a kind of just a nod to tradition rather than having any influence on what goes on within the country. And they're not this iconic figure that people are indoctrinated into just worshipping. Did you know there's a little island of natives out in the Pacific that worship Prince Philip as if he is a living god? They actually worship him as a god. They have pictures of him on their altars. They make sacrifices. Well, I'd say sacrifice. They make offerings. They're not killing people. They sacrifice offerings to him, and they worship him as a living god. We're living in a sick society. People want the world to get better, but part of getting better is learning from your mistakes. If we keep making the same mistakes, if we keep bashing our head against the wall and then ask why we've got a headache, we're not learning. We're not progressing from those problems. The problems will always be there because you haven't corrected the root cause that was creating the problem in the first place. I've ranted a lot this evening so far. It's already 10:30. I thought maybe I would keep going until midnight, but I don't think I'd make it till midnight. I'll just check to see if anybody responded to invites. I think I mentioned I sent an invite out to Jeff C as well. If you're listening, mate, if you wanted to join in, you're very welcome. Other people can't make it. I thought that might be the case, being New Year's Eve, which is cool. I wasn't expecting everybody to be around. I'm sure lots of people have got places to be, parties to go to, celebrating the beginning of the calendrical new year. Your calendars run out of time, so now you've got to buy a new one. Oh, well, what does that serve? Can you not just keep it in your memory? Is there that much going on in your head that you need to have it, stuck up on a wall somewhere where you can cross the days off? Yeah. Day 36 of my captivity. This year, within the calendrical round, I managed to reach day 38. Hello to everyone in the chat. Thank you for tuning in on this New Year's Eve. And it's surprising as well that there are people. I didn't think that many people would turn up. 22 viewers. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for giving me your attention for an hour and a half or so. I've hopefully made some kind of sense with some of the stuff I've been saying. None of this is directed at anyone personally. That's something else that's a common baggage or misconception that constantly gets reinforced in this environment. If you want to point out something that you feel is wrong or that is a mistake or, shit going on or whatever, many people react in a very knee-jerk kind of way of like, oh, you're saying that about me? You're calling me a dick? So I'm calling people who do dickish things dicks. So if you are one of these people that is actively using sock accounts to maliciously trying to mess or harm other people, mess with people, you're a dick. I'm not going to target it at anyone specific because those people know they're dicks. If you don't do that kind of thing, then you're not a dick. Don't assume guilt. The system loves to give us lots and lots of guilt to be fixated on. It's all your fault. All the problems in the world are all your fault. No, sorry. I only just got here. I ain't been here that long, mate. Not unless I've been going round and round. I keep coming back and causing more problems. That'd be a separate conversation. But the system likes to give us all lots of guilt. Don't buy into it. There's too much bullshit already going round. And the age of offence, that's going to be this year. 2019 is going to be the year that everybody is offended. I think somebody posted a meme about that earlier that I'm not remembering properly. I can only half remember what it said on it. But 2018 has been a year when lots and lots of people have found that they're getting offended over everything. Maybe 2019 will be the year that we have a unity of offence. Now everybody is offended. Maybe that will be the thing that actually unites humanity. We will be united in our offence. We are all offended to such a degree that we are united in our being offended. I am offended that you are offended. That reminds me, a little side note, if anyone happened to catch it, and I like to make public note of these things so that those people that have been around for a while and know that this stuff goes on, it's just more little bits of evidence to show that, this is some of the shit that happens in this environment. I listened to Max Egan's last show that he did, where he's climbed back a lot from his original proclamation about the whole mud flood stuff, and he's been much more reasonable now about, you've got to be careful of getting your evidence together and stuff, right? So, mate, just explain to people about epistemology. Maybe you'll help them then, rather than doing this constant thing where you're trying to tell them to, don't claim that you know unless you can show how you know. That's a, hang on, if I can, I'll do a quick search on Wikipedia. This is another one of those things that doesn't get taught in general education, which should be, really. And some people claim that this is just to do with religion, but it's not. This is knowledge in general. This is part of philosophical learning. Learning about philosophy. Epistemology, meaning knowledge, is a branch of philosophy concerned with the theory of knowledge. Epistemology is the study of the nature of knowledge, justification, and the rationality of belief. Much debate in epistemology centers on 4 areas: the philosophical analysis of the nature of knowledge and how it relates to such concepts as truth, belief, and justification, various problems of skepticism, and the sources and scope of knowledge and justified belief, and the criteria for knowledge and justification. Basically, is what is knowledge? Where does it come from? How do you acquire it? How do you gain that justification for that knowledge? This is something where I feel if they gave even just a general level of education of philosophy in the standard curriculum, it would help people a lot, because it would give them more in their toolbox, in their brain pan. It would give them more ability to be able to look at any information that is presented to them and be able to critically work their way through it for themselves. A big part of the problems at the moment are caused by this authority structure of people deferring to or externalizing to some outside source of information. So you defer to some authority that tells you they know what this thing is. Whereas you use a little bit of philosophy or learn a little bit about philosophy, and you can figure this stuff out for yourself. So you don't need that middleman, that third party telling you what something is. You figure it out for yourself. Figuring it out again. But I listened to his episode and I thought, okay, mate, fair enough. Yeah, I've been saying similar stuff for years. A general strike stopping the world would be a good way to shake the foundation of the situation. It might not necessarily, be the answer, and it's got to be done in a sensible fashion, such that it's not just like, letting the world fall apart just so you can sit at home and stick your feet up. I know people get what I'm saying, but yeah, I thought fair enough, mate. Listen to that. And I noticed in the recommended on the sidebar, there was this other video called At Home with Max Egan. And it was this young couple chatting to him. And I thought I'll give that a listen, because hopefully he might talk about his own personal experiences of doing this kind of stuff. Because I still debate or dispute the claim that he's just an outright shill. I don't agree. I can see what people are pointing at when they say about how he does certain things, and it's pretty obvious that he's deliberately fueling the network, the industrialized network of the truth cult, whatever people want to call it, and the latest derogatory label for it. But that demographic of people who are actively looking for information or looking for the truth, whatever they think the truth is, I do think, he feeds stuff into that. But I'd debate whether that's done in a malicious fashion. That's the thing, the very word shill and the concept of what a shill is has been so polluted and diluted that it's become almost meaningless. That's been done deliberately. That's COINTEL. The COINTEL agencies have deliberately done that so that now it's an easy throwaway label. It's like conspiracy theorist. It's an incantation to shut down thinking. Don't listen to that guy, he's a shill. Boom. End of conversation. Nobody then goes on to us, well, what do you mean he's a shill? What is he doing that he's shilling? Do you have anything to back up what you're saying? I've been watching him for years. I've seen his content for years. So what is it about his content and what he puts out that feeds this idea that he's a shill? Like I say, beyond that level of feeding content into that churning pot. But I watched that for a bit, and it got to about 30 minutes in, 26 minutes, something like that. And he repeats almost verbatim 2 of the arguments that I used recently. And those of you that tune in regularly, you might have heard me say this stuff. The one was about how, I'm offended that you are offended. I am offended that you take offense at what I've just said. Yeah, I'm trying to speak truth, and you're telling me that you're offended by that truth. So I'm offended by you being offended. I pointed out this kind of illogical argument used by the state system a number of weeks ago, probably a couple of months ago on one of the shows. And the other one that he said straight afterwards was another one that I pointed out recently, was that really, if you take the hate speech rules as they are presented, then I can claim that the hate speech rules are hate against me because they're trying to shut me down. They're trying to shut down what I'm trying to say. Therefore, that's hate speech. He repeated that almost verbatim. So hello, Max. I'm glad you're listening. Yeah, I'd rather you didn't just keep fueling crap into the churn of the circus game, but I'm also glad that you keep passing on ideas and information like that, because it's that kind of it's almost like a magnifying glass. It's something that in and of itself is quite simplistic, but its ramifications or its potential connection into the bigger picture is very important and very deep, as in its connections go far down into the structure. Yeah. If being offended is going to be something that just stops everything, and the whole world has to stop because somebody's offended, so we would never have got out of the fucking cave. We'd still be living in caves, throwing our poo at each other. And maybe that is in effect what we do, but now our caves are made out of bricks and mortar. And we throw virtual poo at each other and then get offended about it. Well, now that I am starting to lose my voice, I'll just check the chat. If anybody wants to ask me anything, do it now or forever hold your pieces. Just having a quick read through. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining in and chatting in the chat box. I know it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to, get involved in that way, and that's cool. Some people like to just sit and listen. It's about sharing the information is the main thing to me. I don't need other people's validation. I'm not here. That was the one thing I meant to mention. I know I've said this kind of stuff before, but just because it was connected into what I was ranting about, the figurehead stuff and the talk about friendship. I came into this environment to do this kind of stuff, to talk about topics that I felt were deliberately ignored or sidelined by the mainstream because it serves the purpose of the system. I'm not anti-social, but I am anti-establishment. I'm not against society in the definition of society as being large groups of people who live together. That's basically all society means. Large groupings of people that live together. And that living involves doing all the things that need to be done for everyday life. So we call it work, but however people generate the resources they need to exist, society are those groupings that do all that. Society as a political idea, because it is partly a political idea. It's involved in political science if you study political science and all that shit. You can study sociology, which demonstrates some of the elements of control that come from the government into what we call society. I'm not antisocial, but I am anti-establishment. I'm not against people. I'm just against all the fucking dicks, the arseholes, the bad people, the sadists and the psychopaths that want to do harm to everybody else. If you're not being a dick, you ain't got nothing to worry about. Not that I'm going to be doing anything to you, but other than I might point at you and go, "Oh, look over there, it's a dick. Is it the Osiris penis? I don't know. Let's try sticking it on a statue and see what happens." But it's been an interesting year. I thought about talking about the year's events, but Peter and myself did that a bit, and Gary, of course, on Reality Chat last week. And we'll probably do that again this Wednesday a little bit. And there's been loads of stuff going on through the year. It's just too much to start getting into. That as well is part of the way I feel it is one of the things that demonstrates how this environment is being deliberately manipulated and affected such that it protects the status quo. They know that more stuff is going on now. They know that a lot of the paradigm shift is past the Rubicon now. It's no longer you approaching it like the brow of the hill and you're looking up thinking, I'll keep going, I can see the brow of the hill, I'm going to be there in a minute, I'm going to be there. No, now it's the descent into the valley of chaos. And they know that. So they know that there's going to be information flying all over the place. There's going to be stuff going on that is going to make more of this perception visible to more people. You know, that the tyranny of the corporate structure as it is going to reveal itself more and more. So therefore, they've got to control the movement of information more, because if they don't, more and more people will start to see what's going on and share it with everyone they know, and the whole thing will spread organically and they'll lose control. And this is all about them perpetuating their own existence. If they truly, you know, think about this, again, this is just applying logic to what they claim and what they say, their output, their statements, their claims of what it is they're doing. If they are really there to try and help the population in general, if they're there to be servants, to look after the population, you know, this duty of care that they claim, then why is it that they are continuously, year after year, perpetuating policies and enacting new policies that actively do harm to their own population, when it has been more than clearly demonstrated many times by many people that there are other ways to do what needs to be done that don't cause those harms? You know, why are we still using petroleum-based transportation systems, for fuck's sake? You know, why is our entire infrastructure based on oil? Maybe not exclusively, but dominantly, majority, it's based on oil. Why? There is no real need for it. It's bullshit, the claim that that's the only way we could do all this shit. And there's so many other things that I could mention, you know, that question could be applied to. If they really are supposedly there to help us and look after us, why are the number of food banks growing exponentially across the country here in the UK? Why is the level of deprivation, of real poverty, getting bigger and bigger and bigger? Why are there more homeless people? Why are there more suicides? Why are there more waiting lists or failure to carry out operations on the NHS and stuff like that? There's so many things that you can point at. And it's like, look, if these people were really there to do what they claim that they're supposedly looking after the rest of us, why is this shit just getting worse and worse and worse? Are they all so dumb that they can't figure out other ways of doing stuff such that this harmful shit stops happening or gets less? It seems like, you know, they're like an idiot sat there with a hammer just bashing his own foot, going, oh, I'm going to make it better in a minute. It makes no sense to me, but that's, yeah, that's become a standard. Was it Mencken? I think, man, I can't remember that quote properly. No, I can remember part of it about, you know, people look to their government for common sense, but you know, it's just not the right place to look. There is no common sense in government. The very concept of common sense is sort of like, you know, it's a bit of an oxymoron, because you end up with the problem of the lowest common denominator. A lot of what happens via government that ends up becoming a an endemic problem within the society that government supposedly governs is because they have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. So this is like the politically correctness stuff. They've got to appeal to the lowest common denominator of people who get distraught because somebody called them a weirdo. So, he called me a weirdo. I'm so upset. I'm so offended. It's the end of the world. I need protection. So because somebody offended somebody else, we need all these politically correct bullshit laws that mean people get prosecuted. They get fined for using a word. Oh, thanks for mentioning it, Super Leads. I thought about talking about it. I forgot all about it once I started off ranting and rambling. Super Leads, what's your thoughts on the drone situation, the Gatwick drone gate thing? The main things that stood out to me was, one, it just didn't sound plausible in the first place. So there was obviously something a bit weird going on. Either it was some kind of hoax or fakery or something, maybe to serve some agenda. At first, I was thinking to do with airport security and the licensing of drones and stuff like that. Drone technology being controlled and commercialized, so that you'd have to have a license for certain stuff, for a certain size of drones, blah blah blah. Then I started wondering, well, like, this supposedly happened over hours, but as far as I know, I ain't got a drone myself, but as far as I know from the technology, the batteries don't last that long. So are they saying drones were going in and out and like being recharged, or having new batteries put in them or something? So shit like that just didn't make sense to me. It sounded implausible. And then found out the other night, I listened to like Annie Logical and Anne Marie chatting on Raconteurs News. I missed it live. I just too busy doing Christmas stuff. But I listened to it afterwards, and she sort of mentioned some of this stuff as well. I thought it was very interesting that it was Gatwick got bought up by a French company. That to me then said, this is definitely some kind of fakery or hoax or concoction, and it's probably going to end up being some kind of connection to like corporate manipulation, marketplace manipulation. Maybe they were trying to raise the value of the sale price or lower it or affect stock shares or some shit like that. And then I saw other people mention things like the airlines would be able to claim insurance money. Not the passengers, but the airlines would be able to claim insurance money from Gatwick because Gatwick failed to provide the service they contracted to provide. Shit like that. It definitely stinks of being some kind of scam. Maybe just driven by money, but I think there's a bit more of the agenda shit in there as well. Don't know. We'll see in the new year, especially as we're approaching the Brexit. I wondered if it might connect to the immigrant boats as well that have now started appearing on the South Coast, supposedly. I wondered about that for the last few years when everybody's been ranting about the immigrant problem. And it's like, well, who lets them in? There are people at the airports and the ports. So when you're shouting at everybody else, why are you not shouting at those people that actively let them in? And then, it's not just the guys who stand on the gate, the security or the port officials or whatever. It's the governmental agencies that enact the policy that tell those workers to let these people in. You're shouting at the immigrants, and the immigrants are just taking advantage of an opportunity that is an open door, in effect. Yeah. So instead of shouting at the immigrants, why don't you shout at the people whose responsibility is to shut the door? Or to, monitor the door so they see who's coming in and out, kind of thing. Severn Bridge got closed today for a drone as well. Why would they close the Severn Bridge for a drone? What is it that a drone is going to do to the Severn Bridge? Well, that makes no fucking sense. Unless they're trying to imply that a driver would be so shocked and distracted by a drone flying across them, in their vision, that they're going to drive over the edge of the bridge or some shit. Right? A drone ain't going to do nothing to the Severn Bridge. So that makes no sense other than pushing this disruption tactic, or maybe a narrative connected to drone technology, controlling the use of, the accessibility to, and creating restriction zones. That's probably more what it is, and creating a restriction zone over what they define as important transportation locations. So major bridges, major junction areas, stuff like that. Places like the M6 and the Spaghetti Junction, things that are, I mean, I know a lot of people might not realise this, but that junction, Spaghetti Junction in the middle of Birmingham, which is a hideous place to find your way through, to drive, through the junction. If you don't know it, it can be quite a confusing set of roadway to make your way through. But that is so intrinsic to the logistical requirements of the entire country. If that thing got shut down, or whenever it suffers from a major roadblock, companies are losing millions and millions every hour that thing is backlogged. Because it's the major sort of spine thoroughfare through the centre of the country. So doing things like that with the Severn Bridge, I climbed up to the top of the bridge to fly his drone, right? So health and safety, that they'll say that he was irresponsible because he was causing them to have to send emergency services out to rescue him from the bridge. Queen Street in Edinburgh was closed because of a drone, but it was found out later that it was a drunk Scotsman trying to play the bagpipes. Hey, man. Classic. That's the best thing about the bagpipes, is the drone. Yeah, up the security quickly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a point. Huh? Having boobies on a billboard on the side of the road is more dangerous to drivers in general, especially when there's a lot of male drivers. They're more readily distracted. Most males are easily distracted just by the image of boobies. It's like the magician's trick. He's just show them the boobies. They'll look where their vision will follow. It's like somebody has hypnotized them. That's a really good point. And if one drone can close an airport and a bridge, surely a few could bring the country to a standstill. Yeah. Well, there you go. For all those people that are drone owners and potential yellow vestas, maybe that's a new way of causing non-compliance disruption. Use your drones and get them into places where they have to shut things down because, there's a drone. There's a drone. We got to shut everything down. There's a drone. What is, I ask the people in the chat room, what is the main thing from this year that you think can potentially carry on into the future, carry on into next year, or maybe on from there, that has the possibility of being a major benefit or making a major difference? On the reality chat when we was chatting last week, I said I'm glad Peter brought it up, because it was, for me, it was the information about cannabis oil. I think that is now going to make a major difference in the future. It's going to build up and build up and build up. And it might still remain as a somewhat underground grey market, cottage industry kind of thing, which to me is a better way of doing it. It'd be a more genuine way of doing it, and people will get, the good stuff. They won't get the GMO manipulated crappy shit that the government will sell them. That, I think, is going to keep snowballing, and that potentially is going to make a major difference for a lot of the population. You think of thousands and thousands of people that can get health benefit from that. And then if I feel that the next stage of that would be hopefully getting people out of the hedonistic mindset of drug use, putting down the sort of kind of 420 imagery of, oh, it's just about partying, it's just about getting stoned out your face, mate. If we can get past that, then it's not only a body health medicine, it's a psychological medicine as well. Cannabis oil is good for the biological health, but I still argue that the imbibing of cannabis is good for your psychological health as well, for your spiritual, your energetic health. I thought of a kind of metaphor or analogy the other week. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on one of the shows, actually. If you think of the system as being the illusion, the only thing that keeps this system in power is people's delusion over its claim of authority. It claims authority over us, and people believe that claim. So the very thing is an illusion, and an illusion is quite similar to a hologram. And the way you see most holograms, or most laser-created holograms, is you only see it when they blow smoke onto the laser. So, when you see these big laser light shows on a stage, or you go to a concert and the band has, got big laser show and stuff, you can't see it until they start spraying all the smoke on the stage. So the smoke reveals the illusion. And to me, that, cannabis reveals the illusion. And I think there's various psychological reasons why that occurs for most people. It doesn't work for everyone, and it's not for everyone. Some people don't have a good reaction to the use of cannabis. But for the majority of us, it's the smoke that reveals the illusion. It reveals the hologram. When the policeman is stood there saying, "You've got to get up off the grass, you've got to get up off the grass." You're like, why do I have to get up off the grass, mate? I'm sat here, I'm not causing any harm to anyone, I'm just enjoying myself, there's no victim here. I'm doing this of my own free will, by my own choice. It's my body, it's not your property. So why should I stop what I'm doing? What is this fictitious claim to authority that you have over me? That I feel that is, one of the major stepping stones, the beginnings to people making that realization of self-sovereignty. It's not about being destructive. It's not about, smashing up everything because it's all some big prison system that's just trying to fuck you up. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of shit trying to fuck you over, but this is only a prison that you choose to be in. And part of that choice, that choice begins in your mind, in your heart first, before it becomes physical. So I think, it makes a major difference for a lot of people. And I think in the coming year, it will keep going. Hopefully, keep snowballing. Cookie, you are a trooper. Carrying on despite having nasty old cough. Thank you. I've been coughing for years. Something else they keep, or they have done. I don't know if they still do it, because I don't watch TV anymore. I see it occasionally when I'm visiting my family and that, and I get subjected to normal TV, so I end up seeing adverts and blah, just bloody crap. But I can remember years ago them putting out, the kind of like public information NHS things where it says, if you've had a cough for more than 2 weeks, there's probably something seriously wrong with you. You need to go and see a doctor. And it's like, I've been coughing for like years. And it's quite a simple answer. I smoke tobacco. The tobacco makes me cough. So what difference would it make me going to the doctor and the doctor telling me, do you smoke? That's why you cough. It's like, yeah, I know that, Doc. But the TV told me I was supposed to come and see you because I had this cough for years. Yeah, stupidness. And it is something I need to work on. It's got to the stage now where I've got what they call COPD, and it is, it is affecting me. It's affecting my life. So therefore, it's something I need to address. But it's something I'm working on. The cough itself, yeah, I've been coughing for fucking years. Mainly now, it just pisses me off because you know what I'm like. I talk and I talk and I talk and I talk. And sometimes I start talking and I cough. I start coughing and it's like, no, I want to finish what I'm saying. Stop coughing and let me finish what I want to say. And I think maybe that's why it started sticking out more in my brain. It's like, yeah, the tobacco is not helping. I want to be able to say stuff and I can't say stuff because I'm coughing rather than, words coming out, I'm coughing. Maybe you could say that's a bit egotistic. As in, I need to say what I want to say. I've got to say it. The cough is stopping me from speaking. It must be a secret agent. It's a secret agent cough. Didn't that used to be a cocktail, a secret agent cough? I just like getting really random creative ideas from out of nowhere. I don't know. But I've been gibbering a lot and I'm trying to keep going because it's like 10 past 11, 23:12. It's not going to be that long until it's midnight. So I'll try and hang on. It just means I'm probably going to end up gibbering a fair bit. And that's why I asked you to ask me questions because it will keep me going. It's something I thought of many years ago when I was a kid, which was like centuries ago. And you know what it's like when you're kids and you're chatting with each other and you're like, oh yeah, my favourite superhero is so and so, and talking about fantasy characters and whatever. And then you usually end up with the conversation becoming like, well, what superhero powers would you want? What do you think is the best superhero power? And most kids usually say things like, I'd want to be like Superman. I'd want to be super strong. Or I'd want to be super fast. Or I'd want to be able to go invisible. Stuff like that. And it's been in my head for, like I say, since I was a kid, probably since like 11, 12, something like that. My idea of a superpower was being able to answer any question succinctly, preferably, so that you don't get caught in a conundrum where a question requires an answer that takes 2 years. You end up having to talk for 2 years just to answer a question. But being able to answer any question, to me, that would be an ultimate superpower. It's like, how do we solve world hunger? Well, actually, you do this. And being able to give the correct answer. I'm not saying just make up anything and say it's an answer, but having an ability to sort of reach into the ether, reach into the Akashic record and say, here is the answer to that question. That, I think, would be a superpower. Yeah, I was just reading your comment about your dad can't walk, and so that's about the stage I'm getting to. I can't walk very far at all, and I can't do much of anything, otherwise I get severely out of breath, and then I get lightheaded and dizzy and all that kind of shit. So, yeah, it's all by my own choice because I chose to smoke. I chose to start smoking however long ago it was, something like 30 years ago. And now it's got to the stage where it's built up and it's built up. And I shouldn't blame it all on the tobacco because I don't think it is totally the fault of the tobacco. There's other stuff as well. You could add cannabis into that as well because sometimes I've smoked stuff that is dubious. Especially when it was in the days before the trade became more green. weed or bud was less commonplace 20 plus years ago. It was more resin. And at the time when you got hold of some resin, it would depend on the quality of the resin and how many times it had been cut down, basically, because just like everything, like I mentioned earlier, there are people out there that will try and exploit every possibility to generate money. So there were people in that chain of dealers that, go, oh yeah, we've got this nice quality resin gear. Oh yeah, let's cut it down. We'll add all this other shit into it, and then we'll make even more money. So I've smoked some stuff over the years that was a bit ropey, to say the least. And then I've lived in various places where I've, suffered from damp. The one house I lived in had severe rising damp. And then the flat I lived in prior to this one got a severe case of damp. And both times that occurred, I ended up in hospital. With lung problems. The first time round, they thought I was having an embolism. But I reckon it was the damp, the mold and whatever from the damp. And both occurrences were because of crappy landlords, basically slum landlord attitude. Even though I'd been, telling them about the situation, they just didn't bother getting it sorted out until I ended up in hospital. And then they were like, oh, we better come and sort out the damp. So, yeah, it's too fucking late now, mate. So, yeah, I shouldn't blame it all on the tobacco. And over the years, I've changed to decent quality rolling tobacco. I don't go anywhere near cigarettes anymore. The tobacco that's in cigarettes is shit. It's horrible. There's way too many nasty chemicals in that shit. So I use organic rolling tobacco. I've done for the last several years, I think. I think I've got to try spending a bit of time smoking nothing but green and see if that helps clear out my lungs a bit. Because I do think, like I say, I think it's the tobacco primarily. Because I know people that have smoked just cannabis, never smoked tobacco, but they've smoked just cannabis and they've been smoking for like 30, 40 years. And they don't have lung problems like I've got. So I think that, there's other causal elements. It's not just as simple as, oh, you smoke tobacco. That's what's to blame. Gyms are good places to start, yeah. Sorry for the gaps in noise. I'm sure you can cope with a moment or two of silence. I was just trying to read through chat and catch up with what has been posted in between my ramblings. Where did I leave my car keys? On the sideboard. Yeah, resin used to burn my shell shoe. That was always the worst thing about resin, getting the blim burns. But did I suppose that's the exuberance of youth. I'd smoke it through a dirty vacuum tube and shit like that. And so at that age, I was probably my own worst enemy in terms of shit like that. That was at the I was working my way out of being somewhat of an alcoholic. I wasn't a full-blown alcoholic, but I realised that I was rapidly descending into it when it got to the stage where I was spending on average £100+ per week. I had a decent job back then, but I was on average spending over £100 a week just on beer, on drink. And that was what made me think, like, oh, am I drinking too much? What's going on? I'm drinking nearly every single day. So I started cutting down my drinking, and instead I've had me smoking, and in the end I just gave up the drinking. Don't need the drinking. I'm not a teetotaler. I'm not averse to having a drink, but I'm just not bothered about it. Not anymore. I'd rather have a nice spliff and just relax. Alcohol, I think, it's not a good escapism. You don't really escape very well with alcoholism. Well, with alcohol, you get a tiny window of the time when you get that kind of euphoria effect, and you're happy and you're joyful and you want to have a dance and a sing and all that kind of good stuff. And it very quickly becomes I'm so pissed out of my head, the room's spinning, I'm throwing up, I'm eating shit pizza, whatever. It was, maybe that was just me, but it seemed to be this tiny window of the enjoyable part of being drunk. Do I swim? I can swim. I am actually quite a good swimmer, but not something that I do regular anymore. I ain't been for quite a while, actually. But I was actually a very good swimmer. I had all my badges and whatever when I was in school, like the bronze and silver and gold award things that they used to do and whatever. And now, when I was in the Navy, they got me to do the swimming competition. It wasn't any like major, it was just between the different intake groups. It was just like friendly competition between different intake groups. And I did competition swimming when I was in school. So yeah, I'm quite good in water, put it that way. I think maybe because I learned to swim at a very early age, like 2 or 3 years old, I learned to swim. Because at the time, when I was that age, we were living in Africa, in Nigeria. And during the day, obviously, it was immensely hot. And because of the job my dad was doing, he was working at the Dunlop when they were setting up over there. We had access to like a pool community area that was for all the workers. Yeah, it wasn't open to the public. It was only for the workers and their families. So we had like all day access to a pool. And because of the heat, I used to spend a lot of time in the pool. So I learned to swim fairly young. I think it's something that people should do with their children from an early age, like as early as possible. Dependent on the child, of course, because not every child takes to it very well, but majority of them do. From infancy, children adapt to being back in liquid quite readily. So if you get them learning to swim at a really early age, it, I think, makes a lot of difference to people's body knowledge, your ability to have a connection with all of your own body. I know that might sound a bit weird, but a lot of people don't seem to have a very good connection to their own bodily self. Think somebody who's clumsy, somebody who's uncoordinated. A lot of the time, that's simply because they've never been in a situation or an environment where their body has been one of, if not the most relevant thing to that environment. You obviously you're using your brain when you're swimming, but really what you're relying on is the movement of your body. And doing things like learning to tread water, that requires you to be thinking constantly about where are your hands, where are your feet, what are they doing? Yeah, and making use of your appendages to keep yourself afloat. So it's not like just standing up where you don't really need to do anything other than keep your balance. Yeah, you're just standing there. Your body isn't really required to do anything for you to be in that environment. But you can't stay in water without doing something with your body, if that makes sense. So I think it helps people's body knowledge. You find people who are good at swimming usually are quite coordinated. They've got a good sense of their own body size and mass and shape. I can't think of how else to explain it, really. I mean, that might be applicable to other sports as well, but I'm not so sure on that. I think it's because when you're immersed in water, it's like well, it's not like being, it is being in a different environment to what you are normally in. So a little bit like wearing a space suit, yeah? If you were wearing a spacesuit up in space, you'd probably be much more cognizant, much more aware of your body position, where your hands and legs are and shit like that. But, dancing, other sports that involve a lot of body movement. I think it's just a good way to get kids connected to their body, because even though there is a distinction between mind, body, spirit, they're not separate things. They're all one part of the same thing. Yeah, they're all part of the same triumvirate of entity, of being. So I think a lot of kids maybe get that kind of disassociation problem or dysmorphia because they lack that connection to their own body, or a sense of separation from their own physical body. So they don't feel like their physical body is them. They feel like they're in their own head driving a vehicle kind of thing. And that's why they're uncoordinated, because they're not directly connected to their wrists, ankles, etc. They're having to make a conscious choice to go, oh yeah, move my wrist up there, move my wrist down there. And that leads to problems, because the thought process required to govern all the different parts and movements of your body would be too complex. Started at just under a year with your children and grandchildren. Yeah. So I mean, you can even from infant age, you can introduce kids to water, and most often they take to it like a duck. Yeah, I know I did. I was just like the way you always said to me is like, you're in your element. It's like you're in your element when you're in the water. Yeah. And I did. To me, it was just like second nature. I never had any problems. I didn't struggle to learn how to swim or figure out how to swim. It just seemed to come naturally. It was only when I started in school to learn the different techniques, the different strokes and breathing techniques and whatever. Good night, Super Lee. So thanks for joining in. You only got half an hour to wait. I'm sure you have a celebration when the clock ticks over, when time begins again. Maybe it'll be an opportunity for something better. Maybe it'll be a good one without any tears. Oh, that's Christmas, isn't it? From, I don't know. I'm not remembering the song lyrics properly, whatever. Yeah. Space helmets are good. Floating in the sea is the closest I feel to nature. Yeah. I like sitting in waterfalls. I've only had the opportunity to do it a couple of times in a truly natural waterfall. But whenever I go somewhere, like the water parks and stuff like that, if they've got an artificial water for us, one of my favorite places to go and sit, there's something about the descending water falling on your body, and it's like being massaged at the same time as there is this. The more I've learned over the years, I think the more I know about it, but there is this movement of charge, a movement of energy that occurs in moving water. And it's that flow. When you sit in or you stand under a waterfall, there is this increased flow into the ground. If you're in a natural one in particular, yeah. Because I'm presuming you got naked feet as you're standing in the waterfall. Yeah, so it's more likely you got some kind of natural surface under your feet, and the flow of water encourages the movement of charge through your body and into the ground. So it grounds you better than just standing on natural soil somewhere. The water seems to help move energy through the body. So there is an experience that can be had sitting or standing in a natural waterfall that is it's my favorite water thing to do anyway. I like being in the rain as well, so because it's a similar effect. But obviously a decent sized waterfall, and some of them, the weight of the water is too much, but you find a nice one to sit in, and that's quite a fucking experience. Sit in a nice natural environment with flowing water falling on you. Yeah. I'm not playing the bagpipes. Yeah. I thought about buying some years ago, but no. I think I would end up being far too annoying. Because I have that kind of musical habit where it becomes it's a little bit like Tourette's or like a verbal stammer. I mean, I'm not sure if Steve's still listening, but I'm sure Steve probably knows what I mean. Anybody who plays an instrument, especially if you've been in a band, you probably know what I mean. When you're trying to learn a song or when you're trying to write something new and you go through this process of, you can hear it in your head, or you got this idea of what you want it to sound like, and you start figuring it out and you start playing it through, you figure out a few notes and you're like, right, okay, yeah, it's going that direction. And then you start repeating that. And it's almost like each time you repeat, it moves a little bit further forward. You find the next appropriate note or chord to suit it. And you end up in this kind of like stuttering, stammering way of going, and you keep repeating and repeating and repeating. And I know it's infuriating to listen to for anybody that isn't, a practicing musician or into doing that kind of stuff. If you have to sit and listen to guitarist practice in general, it can be fucking annoying. She's like, man, will you just play the song and stop, keep repeating that one bit? So, no, I need to get it right. I've got to get it right. Yeah, I think I would be quite terrible with bagpipes because of that. I'll pump it up, get it up to speed, and then be like, oh no, got it wrong, start again. I'd start again. Man, that really would drive your neighbours away. If you wanted to live on your own, that's probably a good way to do it. If you want to start up your own little country, your own little nation state, and make sure that nobody else comes within a certain distance, just get some bagpipes. Practice them every day. Bagpipe Nation. That'd be I was going to say that'd be quite frightening on a battlefield, but then one myself, I'm just repeating the proof of history. That was why they ended up on battlefields, because the noise could sound across, it would reach up across the noise of the battle, and they would be used to inspire the fighters, and to keep them marching and all that kind of stuff. So when you heard the pipes coming over the hills, it was, something that you might very well be frightened of, because more than likely there would be fighters coming with it. It became like a battle standard kind of thing. Bit like the snare drum, with the drummer boy and all that shit. Whereas really, that's not what the pipes are about, is it? I think it's one of the most amazing instruments. All of the pipes, bagpipes are particular to Scotland, really. Scotland and Ireland, the Gaelic cultures, but they're not unique to just the Gaelic cultures. Other parts of the world have different variations of the same kind of idea. Using like an old goat skin or a bladder of some kind to fuel a air-driven pipe system. even something like the what was it called? The organ thing where they'd turn the organ. Not harpsichord. No, fucking hell. I can't think of it now off the top of my head. My new hat is not helping my thought process. I've thrown the other one in the wash. It needed a good wash, and I got this one for Christmas. I thought, yeah, I'll put this one on, keep my head warm. And I thought about putting me hood up. I thought I could do this. And I could look all mysterious and guru-esque when I'm talking about figureheads and shit like that. And then I thought, nah, I don't need any fucking gimmicks. Hurdy-gurdy, that's it, thank you. Yeah. I think that was air-driven, as far as I remember. The rotation drove like a little pump system, I think, unless I'm thinking of something different. It was sort of like the organ, like a church organ, but it was made in such a way that it was a hand carrier, a portable object. I'm not sure now. Maybe that would be something to do some research into. I know it's got quite a long history. More so than most people maybe expect, considering it's such a odd instrument. I'm not sure that is the one I'm thinking of. That looks like it's mainly just string based. I'm not sure now. Whatever. Distracted myself too much. Sorry, I'm just looking at it on Wikipedia. It's like, hurdy-gurdy, was that it? Is that what I'm thinking of? I don't know. It might be. A violin and a bow. I will seen the wheel rubbing against the. Oh no, it was a string. The strings were constantly agitated to create the drone, and then the wheel functions much like a violin bow, and then single notes were played on the instrument similar to those of a violin. So no, it wasn't that I was thinking of. This thing was like a hand cranked organ, and they'd often be like a box, a few feet oblong box, like a couple of feet long by about a foot square. And they'd often be on like a carry handle, a strap. Oh, fuck knows. Maybe I'm just mixing it up completely with some weird instrument that I've seen at some point somewhere, and it's just not that thing at all. I found a patent to cure tobacco in microwave, and it contains almost zero of the main cancer-causing nitrates. While researching how to cure tobacco. So the microwaving effect gets rid of those bad nitrates. Don't tell me microwaves actually have a good use now. That's going to really mess up the conspiracy theories. Microwaves are bad for you. They're evil, but unless you want to dry up some tobacco, then they're good. Okay. How do they do it in the industrial processes zone? Isn't it just air dried, but on a like mass industrial scale? You just made me curious as to whether they're already using some kind of system like that, and is most modern tobacco irradiated in some way? I just thought while I'm looking at the other browser, I'll do a quick refresh on my YouTube feed, and let's see if there's, because there's only like 20 minutes to go. I hope you all got your celebratory drinks ready, whatever it is you're drinking or smoking or whatever you choose. My YouTube's taking ages to do anything. close down a few windows that I don't need anymore. Try and reduce the bandwidth lag and whatever. No, still seems to be struggling to watch. There was me thinking, oh, I'll refresh the YouTube page and we can check now that it's like I say, 20 minutes or so to go till midnight and see if anything crazy had been happening in the world. It's often this last half an hour, last hour to the last half an hour is when you'll sometimes see some of those crazy stories that, you know, when you first see them, you're like, is that real or is that just one of these kind of like rumor things? You know, I remember in the millennium, a lot of people think it was bullshit, but it wasn't. It was genuine because I remember I had it on the TV and we listened to it live. I think it was CNN we had on at the time. And they made an announcement live on the live news channel that missiles had been launched. And this was at something like 2 minutes to fucking midnight on Millennium. And we're like, what the fuck? Turn it up, turn it up. You know, it turns out, you know, oh no, it was just a mistake. They never really did any kind of retraction either. They just said, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. And that was it. It wasn't mentioned again. But, you know, I think it was CNN, but it was a mainstream news live channel. And they put up, you know, they put out this news story that missiles had just been launched. Watch live fireworks. What's that? Top 10 weirdest mainstream stories. No, you're right. Mainstream's always full of weird stories. Well, at the moment, my manipulated YouTube feed is not showing me anything that's, you know, beyond expectations. Now it most commonly only shows me the news channels. Even though I'm subscribed to a few hundred different channels, I know not all of them upload on any kind of regular basis, but even so, you know, with a few hundred, I think it's nearly 700 subscriptions I've got, you would expect to see more than just mainstream news channels when you look at your YouTube feed. But now YouTube shows me almost 90+% of what it presents to me on the feed is mainstream news channels. CNN, Press TV, Associated Press. You know, I'm subscribed to a few of all the mainstream the news channels. I think probably about 9 or 10 of them, something like that. And that's mostly what it shows me. So where's all the other people that I'm subscribed to? Why don't they show up in the feed? There's Carpo. That's a channel I haven't recommended in ages. Carpo719. If you haven't listened to him, he talks about a lot of really good subjects. He's got a lot of knowledge, especially about growing herbs and stuff like that, growing weed. Yeah, he's an interesting guy to listen to. You know, and I know, you know, there's lots and lots of channels like that, but it's still worth saying, you know, word of mouth recommendations. Seeing Rebecca and Steve's chat on Saturday and Debbie, it was good to see them as well. I'm glad that they're still doing stuff. I know Debbie's working with or she's a little bit involved in the stuff to do with the Sapphire project, one of the Thunderbolts projects. And Rebecca's doing a painting and stuff. So there are a lot of good channels out there putting out content. Maybe not regular, but you know, they create content and they've got that intention of trying to help people. rather than just like, oh, I can make money out of this. Yeah, Times Square is filling up with people. There you go. Michigan makes cyberbullying illegal. Remember what I was saying earlier about the trolls that harass people online? They're shooting themselves in the foot. They're creating this situation where the governments will step in and say, oh, we need to protect you from these horrible people. And so they begin getting you to accept the closer boundaries. Each time they bring the fence in a bit more, so it's just to protect you, it's just to protect you. That was something else I meant to mention earlier. I know I've said this kind of stuff before, but I thought it was worth saying again. I meant to say it while I was ranting about other stuff, but it's that the concept of helping people rather than living their lives for them. I think there is a difference, and there is that expectation. This is what I thought, because it's connected to what I was saying about baggage and whatever baggage that people bring with them from the system. There is that expectation that when they find somebody in this environment, online, YouTube, whatever, and they think, oh yeah, this person knows something about this, so I'll get them to help me. And it's to me anyway, a lot of the topics we're talking about, I'm talking about, it's not something where I can give you help. I can't say like, oh yeah, here you go, here's this paperwork, just work your way through that paperwork and then you'll have figured it all out. A lot of it you need to figure out for yourself. A lot of it you need to look at the information for yourself. You need to find your own way through it. Having signposts and stuff like that helps, yeah. Having people who can point you in the right direction, or share links with you to other stuff that connects into it. But there is a big difference between helping people in that kind of way and outright caring for them, like you are now their surrogate parent. So they don't want to work on themselves. They don't want to do the shadow work for themselves. They don't want to help themselves, within their own lives. They just want somebody else to do it for them, whatever it is. Yeah. And there was an analogy I thought of several months ago, something like that, trying to describe this concept of by helping people educate or self-educate or getting back into true education, not indoctrination, you don't have to be people's carer. I use the analogy of a lifeguard, patrolling the edge of a beach. That lifeguard has to be constantly rescuing everyone from the water who doesn't know how to swim. Because these people wade out into the water, think, oh yeah, this is interesting. I think I'll go a bit more this direction. That looks interesting. Oh yeah. And before they know it, they're out of their depth and their world starts falling apart because all this shit just seems so crazy or so over the top to them that they lose themselves into that. And then the lifeguard has to come along and rescue them. So if you're the lifeguard, you are caring for all those people. Whereas really the way to solve the problem, the way to get to the root of the problem is help people learn to swim. And then you don't have to constantly rescue them. So this expectation, which is fueled by the system, that you're too dumb to figure this stuff out for yourself. You're too dumb to care for yourself. You're just little old you. You can't do these things. You have to defer to these experts, these authorities, these rulers, whatever. They're the only ones that have the knowledge to be able to do this stuff for you. That creates a hierarchical structure and a need for a carer, a master and a servant, a carer and a victim. But if you teach people to swim, if you help people learn things like I mentioned earlier, something like epistemology, or just point them towards philosophy and say, maybe spend a bit of your time learning just the basics, even just the basics, it will help you. It's like learning to tread water. You know, one of the most basic things you learn when learning to swim, how to keep yourself afloat, because that's vital to survival when you're in water. You know, to me, that there is this misconception that a lot of people expect those within this environment to be their new authority, their new carers. And just because I'm here talking about this kind of stuff does not mean I'm going to start living your life for you. And I don't want you to live my life for me. I don't want you to come along and go, oh, don't worry, Cookie. Well, we'll do this for you. We'll live that part of your life for you. So you can't do that, because then I'm not existing, am I? You know, I'm just waiting while you do the living. But yeah, it's a difficult. It's not exactly a clear defining line between helping someone and caring for them. You know, some people need more help. Some people struggle more with certain things. So therefore, you know, you've got to give them more help just for their very survival, as it were. But you shouldn't go beyond that line, wherever that line is for each individual. You should help them to the point that they're able to help themselves and they do it for themselves. Otherwise, you are just becoming their carer. You're just a pseudo surrogate parent. It sounds terrible when you're saying it, because, you know, that being honest with yourself thing again. There's tons of stuff in my life that I'd love somebody else to do it for me. I wish somebody would come along and go, oh, don't worry, I'll fix that for you. So, oh, cheers, mate. Thanks. Now I can watch another, you know, lecture on such and such topic. You know, I can sit and watch a load of YouTube videos now because so and so is doing that for me. But really, if you're talking about helping people, just taking over their lives and caring for them is not helping them. Each life has its own life to live. It's cheesy cliches, but each life is its own life. You can't be somebody else for them. Try and help them if they're struggling. Try and help them if they keep making the same mistakes, keep tripping over, stuff like that. But you can't do it for them. Well, I hope it will. If 9G cooks turkeys, will it do pigs in blankets? What about policemen in sleeping bags? Is that the same thing? How come the policemen get sleeping bags and the pigs only get blankets? Oh, only several minutes to go. Mainstream conspiracies equal Russian intervention, bot factories and aggression. Skripal's fantasy and the yellow, I'll take it you mean vest, yellow vest, just started because of a tiny rise in the gasoline prices. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what they told the public. It's just about gasoline prices and whatever. Yeah. It suits their narrative, doesn't it? So that they can make it sound like they're doing you a favour when they only raise the petrol price by 2 pence rather than 5 pence. Oh, we're doing you a favour, you know, we're keeping the prices down. So, yeah, but mate, they keep going up every year after year. And the corporations that produce this stuff keep making profit year after year. How is it that they've managed to keep expanding? That element of centralisation as well, which, yeah, sort of connects into like the analogy I was just using about the lifeguard, you know, people being able to swim for themselves. That is like decentralisation. It's another way of saying decentralisation. To me, what I, you know, like to see in this environment is that kind of decentralised knowledge base. I don't agree with everyone. I don't necessarily, you know, want to listen to certain topics because I don't find them interesting, or I don't think, you know, that they're not for me for various reasons, or I don't think they're worth my time. I know people get upset by that. So no, everything's valuable. So yeah, valuable to what it's appropriate to. Doesn't mean you have to, learn about everything. But it's that element of decentralized knowledge base. Part of the way problems arise within what I call the system, but that kind of institutionalized infrastructure of authority, put it that way. A big part of the problems that arise, or the reason problems arise out of that, is because it's a centralization of power over others. If you take 10 people, put them all in one house, but then you elect one person to be the housemaster, the possibilities or the potential ratio for, the percentage ratio for the potential for that person to abuse their power in some way will go up. If you put 10 people in a house and tell them they're all equal, some of them will try and create dominance in the social group. Yes, naturally, personalities will vie for a pecking order, and there'll be little groupings and cliques within the social group. But if you define one of them as being in charge, the likelihood for that kind of thing to happen will increase immensely. It's like I said right at the beginning about I do wonder about the concept that the reason the system exists is because it acts as like a magnet to draw out the worst elements within humanity. So you want to find out where all the psychopaths are, create a centralized institution of power over others, and guaranteed they will come and try and claim it. So therefore you can go, yeah, they're all the psychopaths. Look, walking over there to that office. It's it's an element that, like I say, I wonder about it, I'll consider it, I'll look at things to do with that kind of idea. It doesn't mean I condone it or think it's a good idea. I don't agree with that kind of, what is it, Jesuit, I can't think of the principle that it's called, but it's that attitude of, I cause you harm to make you learn. I think people can learn without being harmed to force them to. It's the worst way to learn is through suffering. You don't tend to get good comprehension when you've been forced to that comprehension. And getting to that point via pain and suffering is being forced. People learn much better when they choose to go that direction that leads them to whatever it is, a knowledge about a particular subject or whatever. When they do it by choice, when they make their way by the power of their own intention, they learn better. They learn more fully, more holistically, more encompassing about that question. When you chase them that direction, it's like standard school curriculum education system. When people are chased in a particular direction, you don't get real learning, you don't get real education. You get, in effect, what is a sociopathic mindset, a mindset that learns to repeat what is expected. So the child learns to repeat answers that the abuser demands of them. I know teachers aren't all abusers, yeah, but in a construct way of describing what is taking place there, the psychology between the teacher and the student. The teacher is expecting a certain answer, and that's classic sociopathy. The sociopath learns to respond or to output a message that they know will suit what is expected, what will get the result that they themselves want. So a child learns that, well, if I say please and thank you, I get an extra chucky biscuit. So I learn to say please and thank you. That's a good thing. But if they then start applying that in other ways, it'd be like, if I cry and do this kind of emotive action, I get extra chucky biscuits. So I do that. That's sociopathic. Yeah, they're learning to manipulate others through lying and deception. And in the standard education system, that is in effect a lot of what goes on. I'm not saying all the kids are like that, but it's deeper psychology. They wouldn't be consciously aware of it, and they wouldn't be classified or diagnosed as sociopathic. But in a structural sense, that is in effect what they're doing. A lot of it's probably quite a lot. I'm guesstimating, but I think the percentage would be quite high. For a lot of the general student populace, they've learned the answers to repeat. They don't really comprehend the subject fully. They've just learned that, oh, if I give that answer, I'm going to get a decent grade or a pass grade. So I don't need to know about the subject. I just repeat the answer. Oh, shit, I missed it. That's how important and relevant it is. Oh, it is just another calendar. But Happy New Year, everyone. I'll type in the chat as well. I think I'll put it in right at the beginning as well. Oh, the fireworks are off now. Yeah, Happy New Year. We've now passed the Phoenix. It's now 1/1/2019. I say 1/1/1 because it's 1 minute past midnight. On the 1st of the 1st. Happy New Year, everyone. Slange. I've offended loads of Gaelic people by saying slange when I'm not drinking alcohol. Do you have to drink alcohol when you say slange? I don't know. Oh, thank you for being here and joining me. It says 16 on the viewers. I don't 100% trust the numbers, but at least 16 of you supposedly made it through this far. So thank you for tuning in and listening in and putting up with me filling up airspace with general rumblings and chatter. I hope that at least some of the stuff may have at least had some worthwhile content in it. And it's not just all gibberish. Maybe I'll learn to perfect my gibberish in this new year. You never know. It's a whole new year. It's a whole new calendar. We've got all those blank days on the calendar ready to fill in. Well, I reckon probably some of you out there have already got stuff filled in on some days in the next year. Yeah? Probably holidays and stuff like that. Yeah. Holidays and special occasions and weddings and birthdays. They'll already be in the calendar in advance. Yeah, because we live now. We live in the moment now, but we're always looking. What's coming? What's ahead? Where is this direction taking us to? That is the externalized construct that we could describe as being society. Society is that congregating of expectation and mindset or thought pattern. Because there are different cultures, different societies, they live in different ways. Certain differences anyway, not radically different. We all need to eat and drink and pee and poo and all that kind of stuff. But the decoration, the set decoration of each society is slightly different, maybe put it that way. But yeah, society is that which is the plan for the future. It only exists in the future. What exists now? Does society exist in the now? Maybe that's a bit too much of a open-ended question. The more I think about it, the more I do conclude that society exists in the future. Because if you weren't planning for the future, you wouldn't need to gather together in groups. It's only the expectations that project into the future that create that advantage to working in groups. Because that's what it comes down to. The reason really that we congregate together and live together and, you know, create societal structures is because we benefit out of those group workings. Many hands make light work, that kind of thing. It takes, you know, an entire civilization to build a pyramid, supposedly. An entire city full of slaves to build one pyramid. It makes me wonder as well. The question I was asking earlier, that kind of rhetorical question of what is the purpose of the figurehead? Do we need that figurehead, or is it just like a teddy bear under a child's bed? It's there to placate your fears. You know, the reason the child puts the teddy bear under the bed is so that the teddy bear will, you know, protect him or her from any of the monsters that live under the bed. You know, the teddy bear acts as like the guardian of that dark region, that void of not knowing, the void, the emptiness that their fear grows out of, the unknown. So a figurehead's just an extension of that same psychology. You could say Bruce has been my figurehead for the last few years because he's more commonly than not. Sometimes I've had a different picture there, but it's usually Bruce. At some point, I might actually hang that on the wall. I don't know. Maybe I'll move it over here so that you can't see it. I'll have it like up on this wall so I can see it. Something that I've never bothered getting around to in this flat. I haven't hung up any pictures anywhere. I don't know why. It's just normally I do. I like having pictures on the wall. I used to have a lot of posters up and stuff like that, but for some reason when I moved in here, it just, I don't know. I think maybe I enjoyed having the big, just open wall space. Might be those beams that sort of put it in my head. It's like defines them as almost like a blank canvas. I like things like Pollock. I don't know if you've, you know, the artist Jackson Pollock. I know a lot of people can't stand him because they think he's a, you know, kind of lovey, new age, academic, whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you are. You can be the nicest person in the world, but there's always somebody out there that thinks you're a dick. Whatever. I know, you know, it's true for a lot of the people in high society kind of stuff. There's usually something a bit off about them, or there's often something a bit off about them. But I just liked his work. I liked his painting because there was an element of detail and exuberance and activity in all the colours and stuff like that. And then you had the gaps in between. You know, it wasn't just all the colours. The colours wouldn't make any sense without the white, the canvas gaps in between. It's like the gap between the thunder and the lightning, or the lightning and the thunder. You know, it makes more sense when you get the conclusion of hearing the thunder. You end up in kind of like a suspense. You're hanging in suspenders when you see the lightning. You're like, where's the thunder? Where's the thunder? Oh, there it is. You know, it's an element of expectation again. Maybe I should dig into that word at some point, expectation, because you know, it is an X word. So what is it without? Pectation, spectation, particulation. Maybe, I'm not sure on that. Hello, Happy New Year. So I just noticed people coming into the chat room just after New Year's. Hello, Simon, how you doing? thank you to all of you who's joined in and saying hello and chatting in the chat box. And I said to I didn't actually mention it, did I? Because I'm such a ignorant git. Gary had joined the Hangout before we started. He logged in at about 20 past 8, something like that. So we were chatting, and I thought he was going to be in on the Hangout as well. But then the guy who runs the internet cafe told him at about 5 to 9, said, like, I'm closing in 5 minutes because it's New Year's. You got to fuck off. So Gary, he'd sat there chatting with me. Yeah, we were waiting for like 40 minutes before the show started, and the last minute he was told he can't, so he had to go. But thanks for joining anyway, Gary. I've find somewhere decent to have a good New Year's Eve. He's probably trying to get to sleep while all the fireworks are going off. The clocks are wrong. Why are the clocks wrong back to front? You confused me with that one. I miss that, or it's just because I've been rambling for too long. It's gone over my head now. Yeah, Happy New Year. Right, I'm definitely gonna wind it up in a minute. I think you've all put up with me for long enough. Thank you for giving me your attention and letting me ramble at you and talk about some stuff that I know a lot of people don't like to talk about because they think it's drama or that it's creating problems, it's fueling the division and shit like that. Which I know there is an element of truth to that because you give it too much attention and it just propagates it. So I try to avoid certain things and certain names I don't mention and stuff like that. But it's also debilitating. It is self-defeating to not point out some of the things that occur in this environment, because by being aware that this kind of stuff goes on, it helps people find their way through the bullshit, through the crazy maze, through the circus game that goes on in this environment. So I won't avoid talking about or mentioning stuff like that. I think it has to be mentioned. If you just ignore it, it doesn't go away, it doesn't solve the problem. It's true that it's not a good idea to feed trolls, but at the same time, just outright ignoring them doesn't solve the problem either. They'll just keep coming back again and again and again and again and again. So at some point, you have to deal with them in one way or another. So yeah, you get to choose your friends. You don't get to choose your family, but you have an element of, usually, hopefully, if you have a decent family, you get that unconditional acceptance of being, born into a family, because you don't get to choose your family. That's just, that's where you happen to be. I know there's some spiritual argument that you do choose your incarnation and stuff like that, but leaving that aside, but you do get to choose your friends. And I want to work towards a world or an environment where people don't shit on each other just to benefit themselves. And whether if that benefits financial or just entertainment value, for the abuser, I ain't interested in that shit. I think it's about time we grew out of that. It is just childish. So if you're one of those people that likes doing that kind of silly shit, don't expect me to want to be your friend, because I ain't going to be. And don't try and use my own professed good intentions to try and force me to be your friend, because that won't work either. I'll just call you out on it. Yeah. Stop playing silly games and grow up, for fuck's sake. Anyway, I think it's time I go and eat a brownie and sit and chill out. And I might sit and just flick through the YouTube for a bit and just keep an eye out, see if anything freaky happens, or if anybody else is doing any broadcasts or anything. Can't think that anybody else would be on New Year's morning, but you never know. Once more, thanks again, folks. Thanks for joining in. I hope we all have a great new year. Past the worst of the winter now, so going upwards, looking forward to the sun coming back again. Think that direction rather than back into the darkness. We're heading out of the tunnel. I think we're on Wednesday night on Reality Chat, on the Reality Chat channel. So tune in again then if you want to listen to us chatting about what's been going on. And I think Steve will be on again on Saturday. I'm not sure who else might be doing broadcasts during the week. I don't think Raconteurs News are doing one tomorrow, not as far as I remember. They're not back until next week, I think. But of course, there's always other channels, out there doing stuff. So I know this is gonna keep going, keep snowballing. Even as they're restricting it, people will find other ways of doing stuff. They'll find other ways of communicating with each other and sharing information. So don't believe the bullshit. Don't believe the determinism. Don't believe the illogical arguments that there's nothing you can do. All bullshit, just meant to disempower you and stop you doing whatever it is you're doing. So yeah, enough. I've rambled enough. Thanks again, folks. Happy New Year, cat cheese.